He's almost there.
I wish I had.
So there's a holding room for your coat and everything, sir.
Oh, okay, cool.
Okay, Dan. Oops.
The other end.
What's the post-comment? What's our plan?
So
Dan's going to kick it off. Get some green lights and ground rules.
stay and receive testimony, or Nick can do it in your place. If you need to take off, you take off and have Nick there. If somebody doesn't have remarks, kick it off. We'll call the panel, we'll call it for receive testimony. We have a name card there for who's going to.
Great, okay. All right.
So, remarks.
Right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the People's Hearing. That's it, I want to hear some noise. I was hoping to say welcome to Scott Pruitt's retirement party, but maybe we'll get to that next, I guess. My name is Dan Zarilli. I'm the Senior Director for Climate Policy and Programs here in the Mayor's office. I'm thrilled to be here today. It is so critically important that New Yorkers' voices are heard on the Clean Power Plan, and that's what today is about. We need to make sure the EPA hears from us. We've got a lot of people to thank for pulling this together today. First and foremost, we've got the sponsors of this event. We've done incredible work with the State Attorney General's office, Eric Schneiderman and his team. Let's give them a round of applause. We have great support from our local council member, Kostas. Let's thank him. Our hosts at the New School, and you'll hear from them in a second, Michelle DePass and Joel Towers. Thank you so much for having us here in your house. And it's remarkable that I probably can't even get through this whole list, and so I'm not going to try. All the advocates, all the organizers, all the supporters who helped us get people out here today, who helped co-sponsor this event, thank you to all of you. And certainly the Mayor's Office team, Michael Shake and his team in the Climate Policy and Programs team in the Mayor's Office. And a special thank you to all of you here today who are here to make sure your voices are heard. Thank you, and give yourself a round of applause. So we're here, and I have one more thank you, of course, and to our friends at State DEC and Joel Binder, and we're going to thank him. He's going to speak in a few minutes as well. Thanks to the State DEC. We're here to talk about the Clean Power Plan, and what the Clean Power Plan is really about fundamentally is climate action, it's about clean air, it's about climate justice. And all of those things are incredibly important here in New York City. We know that, and we need to make sure that message gets to the EPA. When they took steps to rescind the Clean Power Plan and at first only decided to take comments from one public hearing in West Virginia, we knew that was wrong. We stood up with many cities across the country demanding more hearings. They did relent. There's one in San Francisco, there's one in Wyoming, and there's one in Kansas City. They still ignored New York City. And so that's why we're here today. It's wrong that they're not hearing from New York City, and we need to make sure that the EPA hears from New Yorkers. That's what we're here to do today. Because we know that climate change is probably the fight of our lives, but increasingly becoming the fight of the lives of our children, our grandchildren. We saw the effects here during Hurricane Sandy. The most recent hurricane season continues to put an exclamation point on it. The wildfires in California. All of that is going to be hard enough to deal with going forward. It's even worse when we have a void of climate leadership in D.C. right now at the EPA and in the White House. But the good news is that we don't wait for others to make our voices heard. We don't wait for others here in New York to make sure that we take action on climate when a challenge arises. So there's no time for that. We step up and we lead, and that's what you're seeing here today, and that's what we're all doing here together as a city. Sandy itself was a turning point for a lot of us in thinking about climate change, and especially the administration here and the city. We took steps to immediately accelerate our own climate action, committing to an 80% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2050, aligning ourselves with the Paris Agreement, releasing a new 1.5 degree plan to make sure that we're on target for the stretch target of the Paris Agreement, and accelerating our own action with building retrofit mandates that we're hoping to pass soon, as well as other action on electric vehicles and more to come. There's a lot more of that, and working with other cities. But our collective voices need to be heard at this point. And it's clear that the EPA has forgotten its mandate to protect human health and the environment. And again, the Clean Power Plan, setting the first ever limits on carbon pollution from power plants, which are the largest source of pollution in the country that's driving dangerous climate change, has to be addressed. These changes, had they gone into effect, would have prevented 3,600 premature deaths, 90,000 childhood asthma attacks, and would continue to help us meet our commitments to the Paris Agreement. And that's why canceling the Clean Power Plan is completely unacceptable, and that's why we're fighting back. With the leadership of the AG's office, we're already engaged in litigation to protect the Clean Power Plan, and now today we're taking our voice into the comments section, into the EPA directly to make sure that they understand that climate change is already impacting New York City in the here and now. It's not something that's going to happen to somebody else far away. It's happening to all of us, and it's happening here and now. And will have catastrophic consequences. EPA is legally obligated to regulate greenhouse gas emissions from its power plants. That much is clear. And New York and New York City have been reducing our own emissions, taking matters into our own hands, but we need the Clean Power Plan to address the emissions that are coming from the power sector even further. Without this Clean Power Plan, the city's air quality and our health of our residents will suffer. So we want to hear from you. We want to make sure these messages get to Washington. We're going to help deliver these messages to Washington that we get here today, because in the absence of that public hearing with the EPA, we're going to make sure those voices are heard. So I'm going to turn it over now to our friends at the AG's office. Michael Myers is going to say a few words up here at the podium. We'll have a few other introductory remarks. We'll go through the ground rules, and then we're going to get into it. So thank you, everybody, for being here today. And it's a real pleasure to be here and to work with all of you to make sure New York's voices are heard. Thank you very much. Michael?
Thank you very much, Dan. Good afternoon. I'm Michael Myers, Senior Counsel in the New York Attorney General's Office. I'm pleased to be here today on behalf of Attorney General Eric Schneiderman's Environmental Protection Bureau at this public hearing on EPA's proposed repeal of the Clean Power Plan. The Attorney General's Office has fought for national limits on carbon pollution for power plants for 15 years. Most recently, we've led a coalition of 18 states and 7 cities, including New York, defending the Clean Power Plan in court. We're here today at the New School because EPA, under Administrator Pruitt, refused our request and that of many other states to hold a public hearing where our residents, who are at the front lines of climate change's increasingly devastating impacts, could be heard. And although EPA has apparently declined our invitation to hear your testimony in person, a transcript of today's testimony, as well as written statements, will be sent to EPA. Attorney General Schneiderman strongly opposes EPA's proposed repeal of the Clean Power Plan. The Clean Power Plan is well grounded in the law and the science. In my brief remarks today, I'll discuss one of the fundamental flaws of the proposed repeal and also highlight the plan's importance to our efforts as a country and a state to address climate change harms. EPA told the D.C. Circuit Court last year that no serious effort to address the monumental problem of climate change can succeed without meaningfully limiting power plants' CO2 emissions. Yet, that is exactly the course EPA now proposes to take in repealing the Clean Power Plan without first replacing it with an equal or better rule. The law is clear. EPA has an obligation under the Clean Air Act to limit carbon pollution from existing power plants. Replacing something with nothing would violate the statute. That's why Attorney General Schneiderman has promised to sue if EPA follows through with its proposed repeal. Regarding the Clean Power Plan's importance, it's the first nationwide limit on climate change pollution from existing fossil-fueled power plants. And although the rule's requirements are modest, they add up to meaningful reductions because all states with fossil-fueled power plants must take steps to cut carbon pollution. We can and must do more to address climate change, including expediting a transition to zero carbon sources of energy. But the Clean Power Plan can serve as a cornerstone for those efforts. If implemented, the plan would reduce climate change pollution from existing power plants by roughly 1/3 from 2005 levels. That's like taking 70% of our gasoline-powered cars off the road from a climate change pollution standpoint. The Clean Power Plan's emission reductions are essential to help stem the increasing harms that all of us, especially our most vulnerable communities, face from climate change. For example, we've seen throughout New York more extreme rainfall events in which unprecedented amounts of rain have washed away roads and homes, causing the loss of life and large-scale property damage. And storm damage is also worsened by sea level rise. This past October, we marked the 5th anniversary of Hurricane Sandy, where sea level rise worsened the destruction the storm caused in our communities, including 2 million people left without power and 43 deaths. Sea level rise increased Sandy-related flooding by 25 square miles, resulting in damage to the homes of an additional 80,000 people in the city. And Sandy's cost to New York will likely reach $40 billion, including over $32 billion to repair and restore damaged housing, parks, and infrastructure, and to cover economic losses and other expenses. And as the climate warms, it will make it even harder for New York to address the pervasive problem of smog, which triggers asthma attacks and even premature deaths. The science tells us that unless we significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions now, we can expect even worse harms in the future. Limiting carbon pollution from power plants also results in reductions in other harmful pollutants, such as sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, and mercury. That means fewer premature deaths, asthma attacks, and lost workdays. Indeed, we've seen these benefits as a result of New York's participation in the successful Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. In closing, Attorney General Schneiderman will continue to fight to limit harmful climate change. This includes holding the EPA to its legal obligation to require limits on carbon pollution from power plants that endangers New Yorkers. The Attorney General calls on EPA to abandon its misguided and dangerous efforts to repeal the Clean Power Plan. Thank you.
Next up, Councilman Constantinides, who we should applaud for getting critical legislation passed and signed by the mayor yesterday to phase out and accelerate the phase out of the dirtiest fuels in the city's power plants. We want to thank him for that as well.
Good afternoon. My name is Constantinides, council member representing District 22, and I've been a chair of the Environmental Protection Committee of the Council for the last 2.5 years, and a member of the committee beginning my 11th year, either as a staff member or a member of the committee. As we all know in this room, there is simply no debate over the existence of man-made climate change. The science has shown this. The data has shown this. And increasingly, our own lived experience has shown this. Just this past week alone, we've been inundated with frigid bursts of Arctic air, which have likely grown stronger due to the effect global warming has had on the jet stream. Leave the eastern U.S., however, and you will see nearly everywhere else on Earth is currently experiencing temperatures far above normal for this time of year. There are few parts of this planet that have yet to endure an unnatural amount of warmth, chill, storms, wildfires, or other disastrous weather events over the past decade. And this comes with a high cost. In 2015, Citibank estimated that the cost of inaction could rise as high as $44 trillion by 2060. Despite all that, we are gathered here today because the national EPA has decided that none of these sobering facts matter, and that former President Obama's Clean Power Plan, which would have required a 32% emissions reduction from power plants by the year 2030, must be overturned. In the press release announcing this shift, the EPA Administrator, Scott Pruitt, touted the agency's reinstating transparency into how we protect our environment. This from the man who, as Attorney General of Oklahoma, revealed only through an open records request that his office literally copied and pasted letters drafted by the oil and gas companies onto government stationery for submission to Obama's EPA. The press release also claimed that the repeal of the Clean Power Plan would save up to $33 billion in avoided compliance costs. Aside from that fact, other power producers have already made market-driven investments in more efficient equipment. The Federal Office of Management and Budget has estimated that the government has already had to spend $350 billion, $4 to $6 billion a year. And in the following 20 years, the cost will rise to between $13 and $23 billion a year. And that's just the monetary losses. As Dan Zerli talked about, as adopted, the original Clean Power Plan would have prevented 3,600 premature deaths, 1,700 heart attacks, 90,000 asthma attacks, and 300,000 missing work and school days a year. That is saying nothing of the countless lives that will be lost around the world due to extreme heat and sea level rise over the course of the next century. Even if the administration takes this callous position that the lives of those outside the borders of the United States are simply not our responsibility, which we strongly disagree with, the reality of climate change, which is bound to create a refugee crisis, to be sure we still have a chance to avert this catastrophe and to resist the worst abuses of this administration. There's much we must and can do on the local and state levels. Here in New York City, we have taken the initiative. As Dan Zerli talked about just yesterday, Mayor de Blasio signed into law legislation that would speed up the phase-out of number 4 and number 6 oils in local power plants. On the state level, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative will be strengthened, seeking an additional 30 million emissions reductions in participating states, equivalent to avoiding 1 year's worth of emissions from over 25 million cars. Ultimately, we cannot succeed unless we are all in this together. We need a national and global commitment to combat climate change. I ask the EPA to reconsider this rash, capricious decision that has little justification other than preserving profits and the worst excesses of the fossil fuel industry. And if it doesn't reconsider, I'll be proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with our partners, our Attorney General, Eric Schneiderman, and our Mayor, Bill de Blasio, as we bring this administration into court to have them explain their poor actions on behalf of the American people. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Now it's my pleasure to introduce John Binder from the State Department of Environmental Conservation. John, thank you.
Thank you. My name is John Binder, and I'm an attorney with the State Department of Environmental Conservation. I want to thank the city and also the Attorney General's office for hosting this event. And I also want to thank Mike Myers and others from the Attorney General's office who vigorously defend the state's interests in litigation, particularly on climate change issues. And most importantly, I want to thank you all for being here and making your voices heard. New York State strongly opposes EPA's attempt to roll back federal climate change initiatives like the Clean Power Plan. The changing climate, which we all know is caused by greenhouse gas emissions, imperils Americans and residents of the state in a number of ways. From the damage caused by rising sea levels that are threatening to submerge a large portion of the eastern United States, to the intense storms like we saw last year, to drought and extreme heat events, to the spread of diseases, and of course to the substantial alteration of the natural environment and habitats. Given all of these and other profound impacts of climate change, weakening any program that addresses climate change is misguided and irresponsible. Instead of going backwards, EPA should be maintaining and strengthening programs like the Clean Power Plan in order to continue progress towards the emission reductions that science informs us are needed in order to reduce the substantial risks to public health and the environment that are resulting from a changing climate. In spite of the federal government going backwards, which is the highest emitting fuel, and we're doing all of this through a combination of emission limits and programs that support renewable energy, both large centralized sources of renewable energy like wind and solar farms, but also distributed energy resources. Through all of these efforts, we have already reduced emissions from the power sector in New York by almost 50% since 2005, which is already beyond the Clean Power Plan's target for 2030. And despite what many people claim, we've had this environmental progress with economic benefits. We've created jobs, we've reduced energy bills, and we've provided tremendous public health benefits valued in the billions of dollars. One key program in this regard is the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, known as RGGI. which was mentioned by some of the other folks already. This is a 9-state regional program that caps and reduces greenhouse gas emissions from the power sector. By requiring power plants to buy emission allowances, the program has resulted in over $1 billion that's being reinvested for clean energy purposes throughout the state. These investments help to further emission reductions while also creating jobs and boosting the economy, again showing that it's not an either-or. We can have environmental progress and economic progress at the same time. Under Governor Cuomo's direction, we've reduced the emissions cap once already in 2014, and we announced back in August that we will be proposing a second round of emission reductions. And with those reductions in place, we will have a mandatory legally binding emissions cap by 2030 that is 65% below 2005 levels. Given that kind of progress environmentally, coupled with economic benefits that we've seen, it's simply inconceivable that the nation cannot achieve the Clean Power Plan's relatively modest 32% reduction target. That's just half of what we've already achieved and will achieve in the region by 2030. We know it's possible in New York and in the Reggie states because we've already done it, and we're going to continue doing it. We're getting these emission reductions by building renewable energy, using energy more efficiently, and phasing out the dirtiest power plants. One example is the Clean Energy Standard, which is a New York State program that requires a nation-leading 50% renewable energy by 2030. So half of our electricity in the state will be from renewable energy resources by 2030. We also have set a nation-leading target of 2,400 megawatts of offshore wind by 2030. Just last week, as part of the State of the State, Governor Cuomo announced additional nation-leading climate change and energy initiatives, including the nation's most ambitious goal to support energy storage, which allows carbon-free resources like solar and wind to be stored for use at peak times, reducing reliance on inefficient and dirty peaking power plants. Governor Cuomo also announced the zero-cost Solar for All program, which will provide the cost-saving benefits of shared community solar for 10,000 low-income New Yorkers. All of these initiatives and others enable us to phase out the highest emitting power resources. There are only 2 power plants left in the state of New York that still burn coal, and as Governor Cuomo has directed, the department, DEC, will be establishing regulations setting limits of carbon dioxide emissions on existing power plants so that these remaining coal-burning power plants will be repowering or closed by 2020. Governor Cuomo has also directed the department to establish limits on ozone-forming pollutants from high-emitting peaking power plants, and also to include these power plants under the RGGI cap. Through all of these efforts, we're leading the nation and even the world in reducing emissions from the power sector. Governor Cuomo recently joined with the governors of California and Washington State back in June to establish the United States Climate Alliance, which now has 15 states that are committed to meeting or exceeding the emission targets under the Paris Agreement. But again, as important as all of this leadership is at the city and the state level, we're only responsible for a small portion of United States emissions, and that's why we need national action as well. The Clean Power Plan was just one example of a common sense initiative which would have enabled all states across the country to follow the lead of New York and reap the environmental and economic benefits that we can realize when we implement these types of programs. The clean energy initiatives reduce emissions, create jobs, and provide public health benefits. That's why the Clean Power Plan should be made even stronger and not repealed. We will continue to fight for these kinds of programs at the state and federal level. We'll continue to implement them at the state level. And with that, I don't want to take up any more time. We want to hear from you. So thank you, and we look forward to hearing your input. Thank you.
Thanks, John. I'd love to echo that. Enough of us. Let's hear from you. Let's get this started. A couple of ground rules. So we have a first panel coming up with, I'm going to just start announcing names. So the first panel with Michelle DePass and Joel Towers. feel free to join, and maybe I'll do some ground rules while you're heading up to the stage. So everyone has 3 minutes to speak. We've got a big crowd. We do want to keep this moving, and we want to get everyone's comments. So this, let's keep our comments on the EPA and directed on the Clean Power Plan. All of this is going to be packaged up and delivered to the EPA. We're not taking questions tonight, but what we're going to be doing is taking their testimony and be helping deliver that to the EPA. All of this is being recorded, transcribed. The transcribed testimony will be submitted to the EPA by their comment deadline. But just as an extra caution, we are encouraging everyone to go onto the official EPA site and deliver their comments there as well through their system. If you haven't registered and you're not on the list, there's a sign up at the registration desk in the back. We're looking forward to accommodating everyone that we can in the time we have here today. And with that, enough of us. Let's turn it over. Michelle?
Thank you very much. Sorry, technology. Okay, thank you very much and welcome to the new school. My name is Michelle DePass. I'm the Dean of the Milano School of International Affairs, Management and Urban Policy, Tishman Professor of Environmental Policy and Management, and Director of the Tishman Environment and Design Center here at the new school. I strongly disagree with the Environmental Protection Agency's decision to repeal the Clean Power Plan. I oppose this decision as a former local and state employee, as an environmental and climate justice leader, and, most importantly, as a former assistant administrator of the Obama US EPA, and as a parent and as an educator. The choice to repeal this plan reflects strategic negligence on the part of Scott Pruitt's EPA, eliminating what would be one of the most significant actions taken to address the impacts of carbon pollution in the United States. Without the Clean Power Plan, there will be no rules in effect to limit carbon dioxide emissions from power plants nationwide. The EPA's 2009 endangerment finding, based on rigorous scientific data and analysis, rules that carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases are a danger to human health and the environment. In 2014, the Supreme Court upheld the ruling that it is the EPA's responsibility to curb greenhouse gas pollution and to use the Clean Air Act to issue performance standards, limiting carbon pollution from stationary sources. Repealing the Clean Power Plan contradicts the legally affirmed duty and the purpose of the EPA, and will have disastrous human health impacts and impacts on climate. You've heard it from the mayor's office, and you've heard it from our councilmen, but this data bears repeating. The EPA's regulatory impact analysis indicates that if the Clean Power Plan is enforced, by 2030 it will prevent 300,000 missed days of work in school, 1,700 non-fatal heart attacks, 90,000 asthma attacks in children, and 3,600 premature deaths. Without the Clean Power Plan, huge numbers of American women, men, and children will be impacted. Lives will be lost. And why would an agency tasked with protecting us turn their backs on these evidentiary numbers? Climate change is a clear and present danger to this nation. Sea levels are rising. On the Federation's own National Climate Assessment report states, human activity, especially emissions of greenhouse gases, are the dominant cause of the observed warming since the mid-20th century. This move to repeal the Clean Power Plan shows a blatant disregard for reality. In addition, as the effects of climate change worsens, the federal government has no plans to increase disaster resilience and preparedness or to improve and expedite disaster recovery. This double whammy will impact New Yorkers' health and well-being in very deep ways. In 2012, Superstorm Sandy caused more than $19 billion in damage and lost economic activity in New York City and put New Yorkers at immediate risk of hypothermia, increased flu transmission, and exposure to contaminated water. Meanwhile, hospitals lost power, some New Yorkers were unable to access routine health care and essential medications for chronic illnesses, and still more suffered from mental health effects. 5 years later, we have not fully recovered from the storm, and we are not impervious to the future storms that we will face. As with the case with Sandy, the effects of climate change impacts will be most strongly felt on low-income and communities of color that are already overburdened with social and environmental injustice. Power plants historically have been located in low-income communities of color, contributing to climate change and poisoning those communities with toxic and harmful co-pollutants like sulfur dioxide and particulate matter. My own institution seeks to be a part of the solution. The New School's Climate Action Plan is guided by a goal to be carbon neutral by 2040. And we have a number of energy-saving and efficiency-boosting projects underway. However, given the location of the university, we have limited options to generate our own electricity on site. Thus, we cannot realistically meet our long-term carbon goals without New York City achieving a cleaner, more renewable grid. Abandoning the Clean Power Plan moves us in absolutely the wrong direction. A regressive agenda on climate change also demotes the United States on the world stage. The federal government is currently ignoring the inevitable global shift to renewable energy. Without investing in renewable energy domestically, we are missing out on opportunities to lead the global energy transition. As an environment and climate professional and a community member who has worked for decades to bring much-needed protection to the American people in my own hometown of New York City, I adamantly oppose the decision to repeal the Clean Power Plan. Instead of taking a do-nothing approach to addressing climate change, this EPA should strive to fulfill its mission to protect human health and the environment by enforcing the Clean Power Plan and going a step further to develop strategies to ensure justice and equity in its implementation. It was not so long ago when the US EPA was moving groundbreaking actions on ozone, mobile source emissions, as well as stationary sources, in concert with the states and local government. I was there. I know they can do it again. Thank you.
I would like to thank Attorney General, well, first I'd like to thank Dean DePass. I'd like to thank Attorney General Schneiderman, Mayor de Blasio, Councilmember Constantinides, and the New School, of which I am a proud member, for the opportunity to speak today. In order to be respectful of our time constraints, I will address my comments directly to Mr. Scott Pruitt, Administrator of the United States Environmental Protection Agency, as if he had accepted our invitation. Administrator Pruitt, my name is Joel Towers, and I'm the Executive Dean of Parsons School of Design, a college within the New School. For nearly 3 decades, I've worked as a professional architect designing sustainable buildings for clients around the world, and as a professor designing curriculum for students to prepare them to be leaders in the creation of resilient products, systems, and services. At Parsons, we are at the forefront of adapting to and mitigating the effects of climate change through design. It is exciting and rewarding work. We are building the future, and it's full of possibility. At Parsons, we believe in an expansive view of design. We understand that human imagination and endeavor are constantly remaking the world. That as a species, we prod and bend and transform the raw materials and energy flows of the planet into the objects, spaces, and places of everyday life. Human beings are artists and designers capable of the most compassionate, far-sighted, and joyful actions, and we are capable of doing great harm. Design is not a neutral act. Design enables human action. It is purposeful and magnifies capacity. It is a generative and regenerative endeavor with immediate impact and long-term implication. Mr. Pruitt, solving the challenges of our time will require more than ever the creative and innovative potential of artists and designers working in collaboration with a diverse array of community stakeholders, as well as business leaders, policymakers, scientists, and engineers. The most important and pressing challenge facing us today is climate change. So let me be perfectly clear from the outset. I believe that the EPA's proposed repeal of the Clean Power Plan would be a significant policy mistake and presents a clear and present danger to the economic and environmental health of the nation and its citizens. Abandoning the Clean Power Plan will delay the decarbonization of the U.S. energy sector at a time when the scientific evidence is overwhelmingly clear that carbon-based fuel sources must be retired and replaced by renewable energy as quickly and responsibly as possible. Simply put, we are in a race to adapt to and mitigate the impacts of climate change. At stake is the habitability of planet Earth and its capacity to support human life, as well as many non-human flora and fauna. In that race, the Clean Power Plan is one strong policy tool that, if properly employed, will position the United States to play a leadership role in the economy and ecology of the future. The Clean Power Plan supports three important and interconnected policy goals. It reduces greenhouse gases, especially carbon dioxide. It improves human health and welfare, and it drives energy sector innovation towards cleaner carbon-based fuels and ultimately towards carbon-free renewable sources. Let's take these one at a time. Reducing CO2. CO2 is a pollutant that results from the burning of fossil fuels, and when released into the atmosphere, traps solar radiation, leading to what is commonly known as the greenhouse effect. It is a significant contributing factor to global climate change. The science on this is not in question. The EPA has furthermore determined that CO2 in the atmosphere at levels consistent with anthropogenic forcing endanger public health and welfare. The Clean Power Plan is a flexible and innovative response to this harm because it supports the regulation and the reduction of greenhouse gases. Improving health and welfare. There are many health and welfare benefits to reducing the impact of climate change due to the excessive accumulation of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere that are the result of human activity, largely from the Industrial Revolution until today. And there is severe risk of catastrophic damage if we do not act now to mitigate more extreme future climate change. The Clean Power Plan, as part of a comprehensive strategy to deeply decarbonize the American economy, will help to avoid increased drought, wildfires, heat waves, sea level rise, and increased storm volatility, see Puerto Rico. And it will also address many environmental justice considerations, including climate-induced migration, food and agricultural insecurity, and the reduction of airborne pollution such as ozone and particulate matter that results from fossil fuel combustion. Quoting from the Clean Power Plan, the low-income communities and communities of color are already overburdened by pollution and disproportionately affected by climate change. The Clean Power Plan alone will not address all these concerns, but it is an important step in the right direction. What is additionally needed is a comprehensive commitment to deeply decarbonize the global economy, and we remind you that the Paris Accords represent an important step in that direction. Promoting energy independence and economic growth. You might recognize that phrase. President Trump's executive order of the same name led to the EPA's consideration of repealing the Clean Power Plan. Ironically, the President's executive order would be best realized by implementation of the Clean Power Plan. The Clean Power Plan will lead to the increased efficiency and technological advancement of current, quote, electrical utility generating units. It will also drive further innovation and adoption of non-carbon-based energy generation. This, in turn, will lead to true energy independence and economic growth, particularly by developing wind and solar sources. A study by the U.S. Department of Energy indicates that the contiguous United States has the potential for over 10,000 gigawatts of onshore wind power, an amount 9 times larger than the total U.S. electric consumption. Including Alaska, Hawaii, and the U.S. territorial waters for potential offshore wind, it becomes abundantly clear that the future economic interests of the United States are aligned with the exploitation of this renewable energy source. Far more so, it should be said, than offshore drilling for oil. Solar has even greater potential. Every 90 minutes, the energy embedded in sunlight striking the Earth's surface is greater than the total worldwide energy consumption from all sources combined as measured in the year 2001. Harvesting even a fraction of this would represent extraordinary energy independence and economic opportunity. In conclusion, let me reiterate my unwavering belief that the EPA, in order to uphold its stated mission of protecting human health and the environment, must act to enforce, not repeal, the Clean Power Plan adopted as a final rule by the agency on December 22, 2015. It is worth noting that the Clean Power Plan was the result not only of extensive scientific and policy expertise, it was also deeply inclusive and the product, quote, of one of the most extensive and long-running outreach processes the EPA has ever conducted, garnering over 4 million comments. The regulatory certainty and the innovation embedded in the Clean Power Plan will present a clear political and market signal that the United States needs independence. I unequivocally support implementation now of the Clean Power Plan.
To our hosts at the New School for having us here today. The second panel we have up is I've got Bruce Ho, Kevin Steinberger, and Connor Bambrick. Please come on up to the stage. Thank you.
We can. Here, the guy.
And after that, just as a heads up, Adrian Esposito, Megan Ahern, and Eric Weltman for the panel. Thank you. Over to you.
Good afternoon. My name is Bruce Ho, and I'm a senior energy advocate at the Natural Resources Defense Council, or NRDC, and I want to thank the Attorney General's office, the Mayor's office, and others for organizing this hearing. I'm joined by my colleagues Kevin Steinberger, Khalil Shahid, and Vijay Lamaye, who will also testify, and by many of NRDC's members. And on behalf of our 3 million members and supporters, including more than 180,000 in New York, we are here to register our strong opposition to EPA's proposed repeal of the Clean Power Plan. Since 1970, NRDC's lawyers, scientists, and other environmental specialists have worked to protect the world's natural resources, public health, and the environment. Our top institutional priority is curbing global warming emissions and building a clean energy future, and we have been deeply engaged on the Clean Power Plan, as well as climate and clean energy efforts at the city, state, and regional levels, including in New York City and New York State. Experience in New York confirms that we can cut carbon pollution, grow our economy, and create jobs while protecting public health and saving money on our energy bills. Since 2009, New York has participated in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or RGGI, the nation's first market to cut carbon pollution. Together with 8 other states, New York has cut carbon pollution from power plants by more than 40%. In the process, these states have cut illness-causing soot and smog, saving $5.7 billion in health costs and preventing hundreds of premature deaths, thousands of asthma attacks, and tens of thousands of lost workdays. They have also achieved other benefits. The region's economy has outpaced the rest of the country, even as the RGGI states have cut carbon pollution almost 2 times faster. Electricity prices are down, even as they've risen in states outside of RGGI. And RGGI has saved customers $773 million on their energy bills, thanks to investments in energy efficiency and other programs, and will save New Yorkers $4.3 billion in the years ahead. RGGI has also boosted economic growth by at least $2.9 billion and created more than 30,000 years of full-time employment. The RGGI states have so successfully cut carbon pollution that they've already achieved their Clean Power Plan targets more than a decade early. But New York and its partners aren't stopping there. They've committed to cut pollution at least 30% more by 2030 and expect to spur $3.95 billion in economic growth, put $2.11 billion in families' pocketbooks, and create 34,000 employment years by doing so. Now other states, including New Jersey and Virginia, are looking to join the program. And New York State has also been leading through other critical initiatives, including the U.S. Climate Initiative, the Climate Alliance, the state's 50% renewable energy by 2030 standard, and commitments to develop 2,400 megawatts of offshore wind and shut down the Indian Point nuclear facility without increasing emissions. Recently, Governor Cuomo committed to establish an energy efficiency target for the state by Earth Day, and following through with a concrete and ambitious target and a comprehensive framework to achieve it will be critical to harness the benefits of this resource. New York City has also been leading as the first city to issue a plan to meet the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement through its 1,000 megawatt solar goal, its groundbreaking 2009 efficiency framework, and other initiatives to cut greenhouse gas emissions 80% by 2050. And New York is considering landmark legislation to establish building energy performance requirements. New York State and cities' leadership is critical, but actions by only some states and cities won't solve climate change. Carbon pollution from other states and regions continues to harm all. We need leadership from our federal government to ensure every state does its part to prevent the worst impacts of climate change. I urge EPA to withdraw its dangerous Clean Power Plan repeal proposal and fulfill its duty to protect Americans from climate pollution. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Kevin Steinberger, and I'm a policy analyst with the Natural Resources Defense Council in our New York office. I study the health, climate, and economic impacts of clean energy policies. I'd like to thank the Attorney General's office, the Mayor's office, the Council Member's office, and the New School, as well as others, for the opportunity to provide testimony today on the EPA's proposed repeal of the Clean Power Plan. I'm here today with my colleagues Bruce Ho, Khalil Shahid, and Vijay Lamaye to express our strong opposition to the Clean Power Plan on behalf of NRDC's 3 million members and online activists, which include over 180,000 New Yorkers. My testimony will focus on clean energy and climate progress across the country and how the benefits of the Clean Power Plan far outweighed its modest costs. The clean energy economy is strong and growing. Renewables are increasingly becoming the lowest cost option in many regions of the country and reached a combined 7% of the generation mix in 2016. And in 2016, U.S. carbon emissions from power plants fell to their lowest levels since 1988. And official data will likely show that emissions were even lower in 2017. Carbon pollution from power plants was 4% lower in the first 9 months of 2017 than over the same time period in 2016. Carbon emissions from the power sector have been falling rapidly over the past decade due to strong renewables growth, flat electricity demand, and increased investments in energy efficiency, strengthened public health protections, and low natural gas prices. The Clean Power Plan reinforces and builds on these market trends by embracing the kind of flexible strategies that the industry already employs. The Clean Power Plan would gradually phase in the emissions limits between 2022 and 2030 and was projected to result in emissions cuts of roughly 32% below 2005 levels by 2030, which also translates to 19% below 2012 levels, which is the baseline year that EPA used to set the targets. Since 2012, power sector carbon emissions have already fallen more than 10%. In other words, the power sector has already achieved more than 55% of the cuts required by 2030 in just 4 years. The reality is that study after study has shown that the rule has actually gotten cheaper because of these changes taking place in the electricity market, despite EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt's claims and misleading accounting that try to make it look like the Clean Power Plan is now more expensive. The Clean Power Plan, coupled with strong investments in energy efficiency, would help accelerate clean energy growth and bolster our economy. A recent report from the business group Environmental Entrepreneurs found that repealing the Clean Power Plan would deny Americans the opportunity to create 560,000 jobs and to add $52 billion to our economy. At the same time, the Trump administration and Scott Pruitt have also continued their war on science in an effort to dismiss the overwhelming benefits of the rule. When it issued the Clean Power Plan, EPA concluded that the plan would produce tremendous climate and public health benefits that far outweigh its costs. In 2030, the net benefits, after accounting for costs, were expected to reach $26 to $45 billion. The goals of the Clean Power Plan are readily achievable at even lower costs than the EPA initially projected when it finalized the rule. Despite its best efforts, the EPA cannot escape the conclusion that the Clean Power Plan has significant climate and public health benefits that far outweigh its modest cost, and the rule should not be repealed. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify on this important matter.
Thank you. My name is Connor Bambrick with Environmental Advocates of New York. I also want to thank the Office of the Attorney General, the Office of New York City Mayor, the New School, and DEC for offering up this forum for us here today. Climate change is the most pressing issue of our time. The impacts are real, and we are experiencing them now. We're seeing intensified storms, prolonged periods of extreme heat, increased severity of smog and particle pollution. Climate change is making people sick, it's harming the economy, and it's destroying our infrastructure. The Clean Power Plan, while modest in terms of its carbon reduction goals, is an important public health regulation that will save lives. It should not be repealed. We know from experience that the Clean Power Plan can reduce pollution while also boosting the economy. Through the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, We have successfully put in place a carbon cap and invest program here in New York and in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states. Since 2009, New York has experienced a 46% reduction in carbon pollution from the power sector. Over $1 billion has come into the state to be spent on energy efficiency and clean energy initiatives, generating an estimating savings of over 15 million tons of CO2 equivalent and $4.3 billion in customer savings. Region-wide analysis of the health impacts indicate between 13,000 and 16,000 avoided respiratory illnesses, up to 390 avoided heart attacks, and between 300 and 830 premature deaths avoided. The RGGI model is working and it's getting better. The states have agreed to an additional 30% reduction through the year 2030, well beyond the Clean Power Plan targets. We're attracting new states to the program, and states within the RGGI Collaborative are now starting to talk about expanding to transportation through the Transportation and Climate Initiative. As a New Yorker, I understand the urgency and the need to act aggressively on climate. As a father of a small child living with asthma, I understand the terror of watching your child struggle to breathe and the consequences of inaction if we don't act on climate aggressively. Thank you very much.
On our next panel, we've got Adrian Esposito, Megan Ahern, and Eric Weltman come on up to the stage. And the fourth panel beyond that, Khalil Shahid, Dr. Vijay Lemay, and Patrick McLennan, you're on deck. As you see, we're enforcing our 3-minute rule going forward, so I'll have to get at my hook if you guys try to go beyond that. So we want everyone to have a chance to speak, and so we're here through the whole night. Turn it over to you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Adrian Esposito. I'm the Executive Director of Citizens Campaign for the Environment. Thank you for allowing me to add our voices to the people's hearing for the Clean Power Plan. I'll also pretend that Administrator Pruitt is in the room. Administrator Pruitt, we are here to tell you that we believe that weakening or getting rid of the Clean Power Plan is irresponsible, it's dangerous, and it's also negligent. That even if the EPA, which is supposed to be the Environmental Protection Agency, and unfortunately has turned into the Eliminating Protections Agency, even if they're not going to feel strongly about protecting children, 90,000 asthma attacks, 3,600 premature deaths, the 300,000 missed days of work, and preventing 1,700 heart attacks, even if that's not compelling to them, let's talk about the real impacts of climate change. Because New York, as we know, is on the front lines. And let's look at upstate New York, because there's enough very good people here who can talk about the impacts to New York City. New York's a big state with big problems and big challenges. In New York, in Lake Ontario this year, we had some of the largest flooding in the history of that region. And that is because of unprecedented precipitation and also snow melt in the spring. That flooding caused roads to break down, caused infrastructure, shoreline flooding as well, and shoreline erosion. It caused homes to be damaged. And the economic impact was tens of millions of dollars to have emergency response and also restoration efforts to occur in just that one area. So it's not just coastal communities throughout America, it is in many communities throughout America where these economic but also societal impacts are being felt and are being costing us a lot of money. You know, I live on Long Island, so I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the impacts of climate change to Long Island. Superstorm Sandy isn't a memory of yesterday, it's a wake-up call for today. We lost everything in some communities. We lost schools, hospitals, homes, cars, boats, jobs, businesses, literally everything. And, you know, I volunteered on a crew to help homeowners who didn't have insurance or couldn't help themselves. And every weekend we went into people's homes and we literally tore down the walls if they had mold. We got up the tile floors because the underneath was filled with black mold, and we took out of their home everything they owned. Everything, from clothing to children's toys to the walls to photo albums, and we dumped it at the curb for the garbage men to pick up because they couldn't keep it. And impacts like that you can't see and you can't experience and you can't know from the plush real estate of the penthouse in Trump Towers. But you know it when you experience it. And it is our moral and ethical obligation to mitigate that. And it's not just those main big storms. It's ocean acidification. All 3 estuaries on Long Island have higher acidity levels today than they did 5 years ago, according to Stony Brook University research. That means the shellfish industry and the finfish industry will be adversely impacted, are being adversely impacted. Also, we have saltwater intrusion into our aquifer system, which means wells that are now supplying drinking water to 3 million people will no longer be viable very soon. So these are challenges that need to be undertaken. And we can now not hide our head in the sand and be climate deniers. So to all of you, the governor, the DEC, New York State Attorney General, the mayor, and our agencies, really, I want to say to you that we need you now more than ever. And I know you're on the front lines for us, but I want to add the fuel to your fire because you know the famous saying that all that is required for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. So we need you to amplify your voice and all the good men and women who are here today to use our voice to fight. We can't wait 3 years. The clock is ticking. My clock is ticking, I know. But the clock is ticking and the damages are happening now. We cannot repeal the Clean Power Plan. We cannot backtrack. We cannot go back to the 1970s where pollution was abundant and rampant and accepted. So thank you for your efforts, and we appreciate your fight and your support, and we're there with you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Megan Ahern. I'm the program director for the New York Public Interest Research Group, and we appreciate the opportunity to testify today, and thank you for holding this people's public hearing. So I'd like, while the Clean Power Plan does not go far enough, its outright repeal without a stronger replacement would be a setback for our country and our planet. And I'd like to make 4 points. First, that there are shortcomings which must be addressed in the CPP. There are benefits to the CPP which provide a floor for vital public health protections and investments in clean renewable energy. The proposed repeal is part of an ongoing assault on climate science by the Trump administration, despite being over 80 times more potent as a greenhouse gas over 2 decades. It fails to adequately define methane emissions and leakages from fracked gas operations and infrastructure. And moreover, long-term capital investment in natural gas infrastructure would ensure that it will displace efficiency and renewable energy approaches that are necessary to decarbonize the planet. And these conversations to address these problems and other environmental justice issues have been ongoing and occurring, and input from frontline communities and climate scientists must be prioritized over polluting, dangerous fossil fuel interests and the climate deniers that are currently in our national offices. Number 2, still, as the regulatory impact analysis from the EPA repeal proposal itself acknowledges, the CPP would reduce pollutants that contribute to soot and smog that make people sick. From the things that other people have mentioned on reducing by tens of thousands asthma attacks in children to, deaths that are caused by soot and smog. And on top of that, from soot and smog reductions alone, for every $1 invested through the Clean Power Plan, American families will see a tax that far more Americans are already employed in the renewable energy sector than in coal and other fossil fuels. More than twice as many Americans now work in the wind industry as in coal mining. Last but not least, New York State must lead. We can go beyond, and we must go beyond the modest CPP obligations and truly lead the U.S. in efficiency and renewable energy by rejecting expansion of natural gas in New York State and publicly committing to significantly exceed the carbon reductions in the CPP. Last page, 2 bullets. The state's goal for greenhouse gas emissions must be accelerated to reflect the target goal of keeping global warming below 1.5 degrees. And we need state and local governments, including in New York City, to set ambitious near-term goals to transition to 100% clean renewable energy as rapidly as possible. And transition to zero-emissions vehicles and increase funding for mass transit. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today and for defending the Clean Power Plant in Washington.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Weltman, and I'm a Brooklyn-based senior organizer with Food and Water Watch. On behalf of Food and Water Watch's 1 million supporters nationwide, I want to thank Attorney General Schneiderman, Mayor de Blasio, Chairman Constantinides for their tremendous leadership in the fight against climate catastrophe. Clearly, the Trump administration has recklessly abdicated its responsibility to protect the health and well-being of our nation and planet. We appreciate you stepping into the breach by holding this hearing, and beyond that, the Attorney General's leadership in speaking in defense of the Environmental Protection Agency and opposing cuts to the EPA budget. It's up to New York and other states and cities across the nation to lead the charge against climate change, to move off fossil fuels, to stop building oil and gas pipelines, power plants, and other fracking infrastructure, and to transition to 100% renewable energy. And it's up to us and leaders like Attorney General Schneiderman, Mayor de Blasio, and Chairman Constantinides to resist Trump's efforts to dismantle the rules and regulations that protect the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat, and the climate we depend upon. Food and Water Watch strongly opposes the EPA's proposed rule to withdraw the Clean Power Plan, deeply flawed as we believe the plan is. Make no mistake, what drives EPA's proposed withdrawal is not the pretense of limited statutory authority offered in the proposed rule and its related proposal to devise a new plan. What we are witnessing is another manifestation of the Trump administration's dangerous denial of the climate crisis we are already suffering from. As the dedicated staff of the EPA know, the climate crisis is not a conspiracy. We are now suffering from the damaging impacts of increased global warming. Tragically, the Clean Power Plan doesn't even come close to accomplishing what is needed to keep oil and greenhouse gas emissions from plunging our climate into further chaos. Rather than withdrawing the plan, the EPA should strengthen it to rapidly eliminate all fossil fuel greenhouse gas emissions, including methane from fracking operations, and should be doing so without the use of market-based pollution credit trading schemes that now exist in the plan. Just as a court recently found EPA's 90-day stopgap methane rule delay to be an unreasonable and capricious abuse of agency discretion, this rule withdrawal will likely be found illegal when challenged. The Clean Power Plan was finalized after a comprehensive public comment period during which industry had every opportunity to argue against it. Now that it has been finalized, industry is free to challenge the rule in a court of law as it has been doing. However, we are confident that the courts will recognize the climate denial delusions and financial self-interest driving the Trump administration's dangerous anti-science agenda and strike down this dangerous effort. We're grateful for the APEA staff who are courageously doing their jobs under the dispiriting cloud of an administration hell-bent on undermining their agency's mission, and we are grateful for your leadership in respecting science, speaking up for truth, and standing up to the fossil fuel industry. In the final analysis, New York and the nation must move off fossil fuels, and it's up to leaders like yourselves and the amazing allies, the folks we have here in the audience today, to do it.
Thank you very much. Calling up our next panel, Khalil Shahid, Dr. Vijay Lemay, and Patrick Lennon. And forgive me because I'm reading everyone's names for the first time, and if I get a little bit wrong, it's my fault. All right, next panel up.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you to the AG's office, the mayor's office, the New School, and of course you all, the people of New York, for hosting us, and also for your leadership. My name is Khalil Shahid. I'm a senior policy advocate with the Natural Resources Defense Council, and I'm here speaking today representing the Energy Efficiency for All project, or EFA. EFA is a national partnership led by Elevate Energy, the National Housing Trust, and the Natural Resources Defense Council, working to bring awareness to energy efficiency and affordable multifamily housing. We work with building owners, with managers, with tenants, with businesses, advocates, and utilities in order to achieve energy savings in multifamily properties. 2 years ago, EFA collaborated with many partners in the affordable housing community to work with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to ensure that the Clean Power Plan meets the needs presented by the nation's low-income families living in affordable housing in every state and congressional district. We supported the EPA in the development of the Clean Energy Incentive Program in order to ensure that the benefits of the CPP are shared broadly across society and that potential adverse impacts on low-income ratepayers are avoided. Low-income families experience an average energy burden that is twice as high as the median U.S. household energy burden, and 3 times higher than that of non-low-income households, 3 times higher. For these reasons, we strongly oppose attempts to weaken, replace, or repeal the Clean Power Plan. Implementing the Clean Power Plan through the early adoption and incorporation of the Clean Energy Incentive Program would have delivered numerous benefits to the nation's poorest families, those struggling with rising energy costs that are increasing faster even than the cost of housing in many states. Many low-income and vulnerable households have few residential options but to rely on poor quality housing that results from residential segregation, long-term neighborhood disinvestment, and deferred maintenance to our housing stock. These homes tend to be energy inefficient, impacting the financial stability of many families due to high utility bills and increasing recurring illnesses from poor indoor air quality. Struggling families sometimes spend more than 20% of their income on electricity and heat, far more than the national average of 7.2%. For these people, a cold winter can bring hard choices: heat or medicine, utilities or groceries, or even hidden dangers. Or for example, space heaters, stovetops, and ovens are involved in 79% of fatal home heating fires when building heating systems are inadequate. Existing weatherization and low-income bill assistance programs are inadequate to meet the needs and services. The Clean Power Plan would provide an incentive and expand programs and market opportunities to generate the resources necessary to deliver the goods. Failure to implement the CPP could mean that these households can expect electricity bills that are on average $17 higher per month in 2030 than they would be if we just implemented. Weatherization assistance programs alone reduce America's climate pollution by 2 million metric tons. The total residential energy efficiency can count for as much as 550 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent emissions, or equal to the combined electric power emissions of California, Texas, New York, Florida, Illinois, and Virginia. And there are also jobs and economic development benefits. In the state of New York alone, retrofitting low-income multifamily housing over a 10-year period would create approximately 23,000 jobs across the state's economy. And in New York City, in the New York metro area, that number would be about 11.3 thousand. For every dollar invested in energy efficiency and for low-income families, $2 are put back into the economy through energy savings and increased income from job creation. In fact, energy efficiency already accounts for more than 2.2 million jobs across the nation. Because of these and other benefits, we strongly urge the EPA not to weaken, repeal, or replace the Clean Power Plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, and thank you for offering this People's Forum. My name is Vijay Limaye, and I work for the Natural Resources Defense Council as an environmental epidemiologist who studies the health effects of climate change. I'm here today with my colleagues and on behalf of our 3 million members and online activists to oppose the proposed repeal of the Clean Power Plan. I'm also a former U.S. Environmental Protection Agency scientist. There is no more far-reaching or urgent public health challenge than climate change. It's a global threat with impacts that reach into our local communities today, not in some distant future. To reduce this threat, we must oppose the repeal of the Clean Power Plan. The health risks stemming from climate change are numerous and serious. First, flooding risks threaten many of our state's residents here in New York. The evidence is clear that climate change is fueling sea level rise, and since 1900, the sea level near New York City has risen about a foot, nearly twice as rapid as the global average. With unmitigated climate change, sea level rise in New York Harbor could reach as high as 6 feet by the end of the century. A second major climate change-driven health concern is exposure to extreme heat, which is linked to early death on both short-term and seasonal timescales. In this country, extreme heat events cause more deaths each year than all other extreme weather events combined. High temperatures interfere with the body's respiratory and circulatory systems and disrupt our thermal equilibrium. Average annual temperatures in New York State increased about 6 degrees Fahrenheit from 1900 to 2013. But climate change boosts that rate of warming by increasing energy choices and greenhouse gas emission reductions today. Parts of New York City experience high daytime temperatures and less nighttime cooling due to the urban heat outbursts, to ozone pollution, and also reducing particle pollution, while in the long term, reducing the emission of carbon dioxide, which exists in our atmosphere for about a century. This is a win-win for public health and the economy. Global momentum is building on the side of actions to mitigate climate change, and New York State must continue to lead in matters of regional, national, and global importance. The nation, and indeed the world, watch what happens in New York State. Strongly supporting the original terms and goals of the Clean Power Plan will benefit the health and economic vitality of our residents today and for future generations. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on this urgent issue.
Hi, my name is Pat McClellan. I'm the State Policy Director for the New York League of Conservation Voters. I'd like to thank the event organizers for having us here today and talking about this important issue. So although it's modest, the Clean Power Plan is still the most important regulatory policy that the EPA has ever issued to address greenhouse gas emissions from power plants. It's the mechanism by which the United States will meet our obligations under the Paris Climate Agreement. It's a down payment on the decarbonization of our economy, and it has enormous positive implications for public health. That's why the plan is supported by overwhelming majorities of Americans, why the New York League of Conservation Voters has supported it since it was first proposed, and excuse me, why our members joined with more than 8 million other Americans to submit comments in support of the plan when it was first proposed. Excuse me. New York is a national leader in clean energy, from its participation and leadership role in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, to the Clean Energy Standard, to its commitment to phase out coal-fired power plants by 2020. But we're not an island, although we're on one today. The fact that pollution's negative externalities don't recognize state borders is one of the reasons why the EPA was created in the first place. Even if New York had zero emissions, national emissions would still drive climate change that harms New York's environment and economy and causes respiratory illnesses, heart disease, and other serious health issues for New Yorkers. According to the federal government's own estimates, by 2030, the Clean Power Plan could prevent 90,000 asthma attacks and 300,000 missed work and school days. A recent analysis by the current administration found that the plan could prevent as many as 4,500 premature deaths every single year by 2030. Furthermore, a recent study by the Universal Ecological Fund estimated the economic impacts of extreme weather caused by climate change and negative health impacts caused by fossil fuel pollution at $240 billion every year for the past decade. Repealing the plan would mean more sick children, more expensive hospital visits and chronic illnesses, and thousands of premature deaths that could have been prevented. The Clean Power Plan is an effective first step towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions and other pollutants generated by power plants. Repealing it will worsen global climate change and harm public health, especially for the most vulnerable communities. On behalf of the New York League of Conservation Voters and our members, I respectfully urge the EPA to leave the Clean Power Plan in place and fully enforce its provisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next panel up, we've got Christina Weinecke, Shay O'Reilly, and Catherine Skopich. And just a heads up for panel 6 after that, Rachel Spector, Wes Gillingham, and Anna Baptista. So Christina, Shay, and Catherine. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll get a little closer. The panel coming up after this, panel 6, Rachel Spector, Wes Gillingham, and Anna Baptista. Thank you. Over to you.
Good afternoon. I thank you all for your work here today and for giving the opportunity to New Yorkers to have their voices heard on this important topic. While the Lung Association has had the opportunity to testify at the limited number of EPA's public hearings, we are thankful to put forth this testimony, reiterating our concerns and providing some local information for the attention of the EPA. I'm Christina Wienicke, and I serve as the Director of Public Policy in New York for the American Lung Association. I'm representing not only the 6.5 million New Yorkers who live with failing air quality and the 900,000 New Yorkers who suffer from chronic lung disease, but also the millions more who desire to breathe clean air and to protect their good health. The American Lung Association has championed the EPA's efforts to set strong carbon pollution standards for both new and existing power plants. And some states already having accomplished more in some categories than the EPA had set as a target. We have even found that the plan's goals were actually too modest in face of the scope of the problem, and rather that more aggressive targets and more aggressive compliance dates should be set. Nevertheless, we are on record as supporting the Clean Power Plan as a tremendous step forward in the United States' fight against carbon pollution. It should not be a surprise that we are here today to oppose its repeal. Revoking the Clean Power Plan gives power plants a license to pollute. Repeal allows them to continue to avoid paying for the cost of their pollution, to the tune of some 90,000 pediatric asthma attacks, 4,500 premature deaths, hundreds of thousands of lost work and school days, and tens of billions of dollars each year by 2030. We stand by what we said in testimony to the EPA 2 years ago. Carbon pollution that is driving climate change poses a current and growing threat to lung health and public safety. The changing climate threatens the health of Americans alive now and in future generations. Climate change is already affecting the health of people in our region. Many communities of colour and low income face higher risks from climate change and from pollution from power plants. And ozone, a serious respiratory irritant that can lead to asthma attacks, hospital admissions and premature death, is likely to be worse in much of the Northeast as a result of climate change. Indeed, the case has done nothing but grow stronger year by year, with even more science backing up the effects of air pollution on our health. The proposal at hand indicates that the EPA is considering whether it should issue a rule addressing greenhouse gas emissions from power plants. Not only has the EPA already found the science to be abundantly clear that carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases pose a danger to public health, but the United States Supreme Court has in 3 separate decisions confirmed that the EPA has the authority and the duty to protect public health from these pollutants. In short, it is illegal for the EPA to answer the question of whether it should address this hazard in the negative. The EPA must do so. Not only do reports show that health benefits and decreased mortality from the Clean Power Plan are especially likely to accrue in much of New York, but we also strongly emphasise that the populations potentially at risk from exposure to air pollution are not a few persons in fragile health. Rather, they are groups containing millions of New Yorkers who are at risk of unhealthful levels of ozone, putting them at risk of premature death and serious health effects. In closing, per person we produce more carbon emissions at one of the world's highest rates. However, our nation has the capacity to confront and fix this problem. I'll use an analogy from our colleague at the American Lung Association. Imagine if all the world's people were in a lifeboat with multiple leaks, but the reason we choose not to fix our leak is that the benefits of doing so aren't accruing only to us. In many ways, that is reflective of the flawed logic behind the administration's justification for repeal. We simply cannot put America first without also putting the planet first. We need a strong Clean Power Plan implemented so that we can truly prioritise the health and well-being of all Americans. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. New School. Michael Myers of the Attorney General Eric Schneiderman's office, representative from the Governor Cuomo's office, Dan Zarelli of the Mayor's office, and now Nicholas with Costa Constantinides as a member of the New York State City Council. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Catherine Skopik. I am a member of Sierra Club Atlantic Chapter and speaking today as a citizen and parent who hopes that my daughter and all future generations will have life as we know it. Yes, I support the Clean Power Plan, and I greatly urge the EPA to resume your responsibility of protecting human health and the environment. In addition to the good work that we have found and listened to in our representatives here today speaking of the good work that New York State has already done, I'd like to share with you 3 brief stories. And before I do, I'd just like to say that I support the Clean Power Plan, and if I could change anything, I would just ask that in the grid, in the mix, there not be nuclear or gas power in the mix, that we have even more renewable energy. I'm wearing my wind power dress, wind turbine dress, and that we do it even sooner, like the RGGI is 10 years ahead, I believe we said, and the governor's office said that we would like to move to 0 energy emissions. But I'd just like to share very briefly 3 little stories. Samso Island in Denmark has used energy in a new and sustainable way that gives them free heat, it gives them free power, and puts money in their pocket. USA, here in the USA, Greenberg, Kansas, was almost destroyed by a tornado, and they decided to rebuild green, and they did so using solar, wind, geothermal, and so forth. 3rd little story. Elon Musk, before December 1st this year, delivered a 100-megawatt power system to South Australia, and this gets its power from the 270-megawatt wind farm. And when fully charged, it can supply energy for 800 homes for 24 hours or 30,000 homes for 1 hour in a blackout. These are 3 stories having to do with renewable energy victories. I bet you there are a lot of stories here in the audience. Raise your hand if you also could tell of a renewable energy victory. Okay. So this is what we have to do. We have to keep talking about these renewable energy victories till we are 100% renewable energy. Talk to your friends, your family members, everybody, so that they know that it is a reality. So in addition to all the legislation and work we're doing to get it enacted, that we know that it's possible. And the last thing I would like to do is close with a quote. It's not the strongest of the species that will survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. EPA, I ask you to respond to climate change, because what we're talking about here is our very survival and the survival of all life. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Shay O'Reilly, and I'm an organizing representative for the Sierra Club and a resident of Brooklyn, New York. I'd like to thank our Attorney General for his leadership in defending the Clean Power Plan and for organizing this hearing to provide New Yorkers the opportunity to testify on the EPA's proposal to repeal this important program. At the Sierra Club, we represent over 3 million members and supporters, including about 180,000 here in New York and 19,000 in New York City alone. We are strong supporters of the Clean Power Plan. The Clean Power Plan, our nation's first federal limits on carbon pollution for existing power plants, is the result of the most robust public participation process that the EPA has ever undertaken. The EPA reached out to states, utilities, organized communities of color, tribes, labor unions, and the public at large, and the agency received millions of written comments supporting the proposal. Public support continues to this day, with one poll after another showing Americans' broad support for this policy. The Clean Power Plan is necessary to curb dangerous carbon pollution that is exacerbating extreme weather events around the country. We know the effects of Superstorm Sandy here in New York. They have already been elucidated by people who spoke before me. But here in New York, sea levels are rising 50% faster off of our coastline than the global average due to our geology and geography. While our state is working to reduce conventional air pollution that contributes to the formation of smog and soot, the Clean Power Plan will also help decrease emissions of these harmful air pollutants emitted by fossil fuel-fired power plants from outside of our state. These benefits are particularly critical to New York, which lies downwind of numerous coal-heavy states that are contributing to our inability to attain and maintain national standards for smog. The EPA is legally required to regulate carbon pollution from power plants, and the Clean Power Plan establishes reasonable. Our state's experience successfully reducing carbon emissions from power plants under the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative by 40% since 2008, when this program became effective, constitutes a key part of the EPA's administrative record justifying the reasonableness of the Clean Power Plan. We know that the clean energy economy will continue growing regardless of this administration's strategy of favoring polluting industries. But without the Clean Power Plan, this country will lack a nationwide strategy to guide this transition, which is critical for those states whose policies continue to promote the burning of fossil fuels. I want to say also that the EPA has inappropriately cooked the books to justify its proposed repeal in order to mislead the public on the benefits and costs that the plan would entail. Besides the shady, underhanded behavior from EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt, this also could set a very dangerous precedent for other rules and regulations passed at the federal level, allowing for states to circumvent and avoid becoming in compliance with them. Okay, I know my time's up, so I'll wrap it up. The EPA's legal obligations and the urgency of the climate crisis demand that the agency issue a replacement rule of similar or even higher stringency than the Clean Power Plan. I want to be clear. The Clean Power Plan is not sufficient for rising to the challenge of climate change. We also need regulations on potent greenhouse gases like methane that prevent the expansion of fracked gas infrastructure and power plants. We need more stringent policies that hastily move us off of all fossil fuels. And we need a plethora of initiatives to support clean energy development. But while not sufficient, the Clean Power Plan is necessary. The EPA must not reverse the hard-won progress we have made to reduce carbon pollution, and we will fight to protect the health of our communities from these threats to our clean air and our climate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I'd just like to take a second to add that quote about species survival is by Charles Darwin. Thank you.
Thank you very much, then. Thank you, Charles Darwin. Up next, we've got Rachel Spector, Wes Gillingham, and Anna Baptista. Please come on up to the stage. Thank you.
Over to you.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you to Attorney General Eric Schneiderman, to the Mayor's Office, to DEC, to Councilmember Constantinides for being here and for having this hearing today. My name is Rachel Spector, and I'm the Director of the Environmental Justice Program at New York Lawyers for the Public Interest. Our office uses law and organizing to advocate for the elimination of disparate environmental burdens faced by low-income communities and communities of color in New York City area. Climate change and power plant emissions are among the greatest threats to environmental justice communities. It is a shame that EPA severely limited the public's ability to speak on the record about this proposed repeal of the Clean Power Plan, as it will have a huge impact on people around the country, particularly in low-income communities and communities of color, where people are already suffering the greatest harm from climate change and co-pollutants from power plant emissions. Repealing the Clean Power Plan, which, while it is insufficient, was the most comprehensive step thus far to reduce U.S. greenhouse gas emissions, is a shocking display of disregard for science, for the lives of people living in frontline communities, and for the world we will leave to our children and grandchildren. The state of New York, as many others have said today, has independently taken many steps to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from power plants. So why do we here in New York care about repeal of the Clean Power Plan? First, greenhouse gas emissions anywhere contribute to climate change across the globe, and here in New York City, we are particularly vulnerable to the effects of climate change. New York City has more residents living in potential flood zones than any other city in the country, and waterfront communities of color such as Sunset Park and Hunts Point are disproportionately affected by rising sea levels. We know this, of course, from Superstorm Sandy. 55% of those impacted by the storm surge during that storm were low-income renters earning on average $18,000 per year. Power outages from that storm lasted for weeks, leaving many residents unable to even leave their homes or maintain critical medical equipment and supplies. As climate change accelerates, storms and flooding will occur more frequently. In addition, many low-income communities and communities of color in New York City are urban heat islands, where lack of shade or vegetation, combined with heat-magnifying paved surfaces, exacerbate already rising temperatures from climate change. Urban heat islands and the unaffordability for many of air conditioning create serious health risks for low-income New York City residents, particularly for elderly people or those with respiratory conditions. Second, co-pollutants from the most polluting fossil fuel burning power plants in other states both disproportionately affect people of color there and also New Yorkers as they are blown into our state, blown eastward into our state. 78% of African Americans live within 30 miles of a coal-fired power plant. Oh, my time is up already? This goes so fast. In addition, Latino communities and indigenous and low-income communities are more likely to live near coal-fired power plants. I will add that as lawyers, we must note that there is no valid legal basis for repeal of the Clean Power Plan, as the EPA is required to regulate greenhouse gases. Repeal of the Clean Power Plan is contrary to law, to science, to the wishes of the majority of Americans, to our moral obligation to future generations, and to those in environmental justice and frontline communities in New York and around the country. NILPI strongly urges the EPA to reconsider the proposed repeal and commit to continuing efforts to reduce greenhouse gas and co-pollutant emissions from power plants and other sources. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Wes, before you jump in, I'm just going to give a heads up to the next panel. Just to Genevieve Gunther, Stefanos Koulias, and Chris Collins. You're going to be up next after this panel. Wes, over to you.
Hi, I'm Wes Gillingham, the Associate Director of Catskill Mountain Keeper. I just want to point out that we now have the information that shows that this is not, we just came through the third hottest year on record, but it was the most costliest year on record. Harvey, Maria, and Irma causing the most damage there. But I really want to address what this hearing is about. Is this hearing about the details of the Clean Power Plan? At Catskill Mountain Keeper, I've spent a large portion of my life digging through documents like the CPP to see if they really protect the Catskills, New York State, and our communities. Let it be known that there are serious issues with the CPP. It does not protect communities from co-pollutants. And depending how a state institutes its implementation plan, it actually can incentivize natural gas production. But back to why I made the drive down here from the Catskills for this hearing. I drove down here today because before I co-founded Catskill Mountain Keeper, I farmed for a living. I experienced 200-year floods and a 500-year flood in a 5-year period. Climate change is real, it's here, it's affected me personally, and many of you in this room. It drowned 3 of my tractors and washed away 60% of my topsoil, putting my vegetable production out of business. I am here not to tell you how the CPP will fix anything. It certainly doesn't walk the dog or put the cat out. But I'm here to show my support for the work of Eric Schneiderman, our Attorney General. Thank you for weighing in when the Delaware River Basin Commission was about to frack the Delaware River Basin and pursuing a NEPA lawsuit. Thank you for weighing in and stopping the Constitution pipeline for prematurely cutting forest for a pipeline that wasn't approved yet. Thank you for continuing to defend the state's home rule ability to protect its own watercourses from the impacts of infrastructure and gas infiltration into our state. Thank you for supporting solutions to climate change, such as supporting the Climate and Community Protection Act, which will steer New York into a serious road of making a just transition away from fossil fuels. And lastly, I want to encourage the Attorney General to sue the pants off the supposed stable genius? And sue the industry flunky Pruitt and stop them in their tracks from ruining our communities and our state. Thank you.
I want to thank the co-hosts for giving us this opportunity to weigh in. My name is Ana Baptista, and I am a professor here at the New School in the Environmental Policy and Sustainability Management program. I'm also a member of the New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance. I'm from Newark, New Jersey, so this is not just an opportunity for New Yorkers, for many people in the region to weigh in and have an opportunity to respond to the EPA's repeal. It is vital to allow the voices of the people to be heard on this critical matter. The manner and intent of the U.S. EPA's repeal of the Clean Power Plan is unacceptable. This rule was the product of years of public input and review. It was a fundamental effort to begin the process of mitigating climate change. And the EPA has a moral, ethical, and legal obligation to mitigate climate change. If you examine the agency's mission statement, which is still online, it clearly states that the mission of the EPA is to protect human health and the environment. It goes on to explain on that same website that this includes looking at national efforts to reduce environmental risk based on scientific information. So this repeal is reckless, undemocratic, and directly contradicts the best available science about climate change. The reality is that this proposal put forth by the EPA is not just another bureaucratic policy maneuver. The repeal of this significant climate mitigation rule will have dire consequences for us locally and globally. The threats of climate change are no longer just threats. They are already being felt in devastating ways at home and abroad, and they are being borne by the most vulnerable and least responsible among us in society. Communities of color, low-income communities, indigenous communities, poor and marginalized people across the world are on the front lines of this ever-expanding climate disaster. The Clean Power Plan rule was not a perfect rule, but it was not insignificant. It was because this rule was so potentially impactful that environmental justice activists and scholars called on the EPA to go further and deepen the potential life-saving impacts of reducing carbon emissions and co-pollutants. Last year, the New School released 3 white papers with leading environmental justice scholars, and we hosted several webinars detailing the environmental justice implications of this rule and the ways that it could go further to strengthen and improve outcomes for those communities most impacted by climate change and pollution. This repeal goes in the opposite direction, moving our country further from a just and realistic transition away from fossil fuels. The manner in which this repeal is being conducted also reflects the value that this administration places on the will of the people and the responsibility to public, open, and accountable processes. I teach environmental justice and sustainability to graduate students, and this is a great case study and a reminder that issues as important as climate justice cannot be delayed or stymied. They require engagement with the issue on multiple fronts, many scales, utilizing all of our resources. I not only oppose the repeal of this rule, I repudiate the manner in which the repeal is being conducted and the underlying intent to disenfranchise the public and derail the hopes for coordinated federal action on climate change, which is their duty and their purpose.
Thank you. Next up, call the stage Genevieve Gunther, Stefano Skoulias, and Chris Collins.
Hi, my name is Genevieve Gunther, and I am a part-time faculty member in the Literary Studies Department at the New School and an affiliate faculty with the Tishman Environment and Design Center. But today I'm not going to testify in my role as an academic or a writer, but in my role as a mother. And I'm going to address myself to Scott Pruitt directly. Mr. Pruitt, I speak to you today on behalf of my 8-year-old son and on behalf of all of New York State's children. These children deserve a habitable planet. America must not repeal, but enforce the Clean Power Plan. America must go all the way to powering our economy on 100% renewables. In order to have a 66%, just slightly better than 50-50 chance to halt global warming at 2 degrees Celsius, cumulative global emissions must remain below 800 gigatons of CO2. That carbon budget gives us less than 20 years until all greenhouse gas emissions must cease. If we continue to emit greenhouse gases at our current rate, we will warm our climate between 3 and 4.5 degrees Celsius over my son's lifetime. Mr. Pruitt, you like to repeat the misleading talking point that we cannot measure our effect on the climate with precision. But here's what you never say. We do not need any more precision than we already enjoy to know that warming our world even just 3 degrees Celsius will kill people. The glaciers that supply drinking water for millions are already melting. Where are these people going to get fresh water? The oceans next to which billions of people live are already rising. Where are these people going to go? A recent study demonstrated that American farmers will no longer be able to grow corn in the Midwest once temperatures rise 4 degrees Celsius. What are we going to eat? And what about the eastern hurricanes and floods, the western droughts and wildfires, the northern cold snaps, the southern heat waves that will bring untold devastation to families that my son's generation may well want to raise and protect? Mr. Pruitt, it does not have to be this way. We have a choice. We have a choice between destruction and death on the one hand, or the transition to clean power on the other. So let us choose life. Do not repeal the Clean Power Plan. Instead, create millions of jobs in a new global industry, lower the cost of public health and safety, and invest in our future so that my son and his beautiful friends, and really all beautiful children everywhere, can live safely on the only planet that sustains their life. Thank you.
The National Parks Conservation Association is the national advocate for all national parks across the country. Since 1919, the National Parks Conservation Association has worked to protect and preserve our nation's natural, historic, and cultural resources for future generations. In the Northeast, the National Parks Conservation Association is the advocate for 49 sites, including the 10 national parks that are located within New York City. My name is Stefanos Koulias, and I work as a transportation planner with the National Parks Conservation Association in our Northeast office based here in New York City. And I'm here today with my colleague Tatiana Orlov, Senior Program Manager. We're here today to express our concerns about the proposed repeal of the Clean Power Plan. We do not support this move by the EPA to do away with the very law that would help clean up some of our nation's worst polluters that are driving climate change, coal-fired power plants. National parks and millions of people around the country have already experienced the damaging impacts of climate change, creating dangerous situations for communities, public health, nature, and wildlife. Climate change creates enormous challenges for national parks, amplifying extreme, unpredictable weather like stronger storms, longer droughts, hotter temperatures, and uncontrollable wildfires. Rising water levels threaten the history of parks, such as the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad National Monument, 25,000 acres, honoring the bravery of someone who risked her life to bring enslaved Americans to freedom, and the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island, which welcomed over 14 million immigrants to this country and are a foundation to our history. Sea level rise is also rapidly eroding coastlines and threatening the health and well-being of coastal national parks, like Jamaica Bay National Wildlife Refuge. In October of 2012, over 50 national park sites were significantly affected by the unusually powerful Hurricane Sandy that hit the region. Parks like Governor's Island, Fire Island National Seashore, and the Gateway National Recreation Area were particularly hard hit by extreme flooding. The administration's move to repeal the Clean Power Plan counters existing law and is being carried out in ways that prevent adequate public input. We applaud New York State Attorney General Eric Schneiderman for holding this hearing and giving us an opportunity to make our voices heard. We also want to recognize the leadership of the Mayor's Office and Councilman Konstantinidis, and thank the Department of Environmental Conservation as well.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank the Attorney General's office, the Mayor's office, the Governor's office, and Chairman Konstantinidis' office as well, and the New School. My name is Christopher Collins. I'm the Executive Director of Solar One, an environmental education nonprofit based in New York City. Solar One's mission is to provide education and resources that create sustainable and resilient urban environments. We educate teachers and students in more than 600 New York City public schools, train workers for careers in energy efficiency and building operations and maintenance, and facilitate clean energy projects in New York City's underserved markets. I'm here today to voice my organization's strong opposition to the EPA's proposed repeal of carbon pollution emission guidelines for existing stationary sources, electric utility generating units. Electric power plants are the single largest source of emitted carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, and other pollutants that are known to be harmful to humans and the environment on which we depend. By regulating this dangerous pollution, the Clean Power Plan will accelerate our transition to clean energy sources such as solar energy and wind, a transition that promises to create economic opportunity and high-quality local installation jobs that can't be outsourced. The EPA's own research found that the climate and health benefits of adopting the Clean Power Plan would be anywhere from $26 to $45 billion greater than the cost of compliance, a significant economic benefit that our society can't afford to pass up. Most importantly, the EPA found that implementing the Clean Power Plan would prevent 3,600 premature deaths, 17 heart attacks, and 90,000 asthma attacks each year. As a society, we simply can't afford to wait. Lives are on the line, and we strongly encourage you to act in the interests of the American public by standing by the Clean Power Plan. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to call the 8th panel. John Ingram, Patrick Houston, Ileana Paul. And following this panel, the 9th panel will be Dr. Judith Weiss, Dr. Adrian Wald, and Catherine Hughes.
My name is John Ingram, and I'm with the climate activist group 350 NYC. Attorney General Schneiderman's hearing today and Governor Cuomo's and Mayor de Blasio's move to divest pension funds from fossil fuels are positive signs that New York is willing to face the future and become a leader in a rapidly changing world. To diminish the disruption of global warming, the U.S. needs to transform its energy economy in the next decade. If we undertake this transition now, we may simultaneously address parallel changes that are dividing our society. New York, New York, our global city and provincial state are a microcosm of a broader division that is advancing in other regions. I paraphrase from a recent op-ed in the Times by Emily Badger titled, "What Happens When the Richest U.S. Cities Turn to the World?" The more globally, quote, "the more globally connected a city, the more prosperous it is. As these cities gain global ties, they may also be shedding local ones with their hinterland communities that have lost their roles in the modern economy or lost their jobs to other countries. The economic base is shifted in a way that favors big cities because it is focused on knowledge, on idea exchange, and on agglomeration. Because if incentivized, this work can connect and educate New Yorkers from city, state, and region with the economy of our transformative future. Trump's backward-looking administration is desperately trying to revive the fossil fuel industry and its dead-end jobs. It won't work. Trashing the Clean Power Plan is foolish and demoralizing. Reviving offshore drilling is bad business and destructive. Gas investment is destructive and unnecessary as a bridge to renewables. The price of renewable energy is already lower than fossil fuels in many places and continues to plummet. Storage technologies are rapidly advancing to address the pressure of renewable energy sources on the grid. The market is bigger and stronger than Trump's impulsive reactions, but the administration's weakening of our country's technological and economic position in this inevitable but highly competitive transition hurts us all. For New York to sustain the guidelines of Obama's Clean Power Plan is not enough. The Clean Power Plan was an easy reach for New York State, especially in its alliance with the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. We need to set a higher standard to restore a realistic path to climate stability and demonstrate for the rest of the country how the new economy can revitalize our region. The proposal for amending state bills A5105 and S5908 to meet 100% renewable energy by 2030 may seem impossible now, but if we commit ourselves to this reality-based challenge it is likely that the exponential growth that comes with disruptive new technologies will kick in to get us there. As Nicholas Kristof reminded us in the Sunday Times, the state of the world on many important measures is better than ever, but as a species, we need some highly visible wins in the next few years to reduce climate change to a tolerable level, or lose the future for our offspring. The Clean Power Plan should remain. New York should transcend it, whether it remains or not. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Patrick Houston, and I'm here on behalf of New York Communities for Change. Today I'm here on behalf of one of our members, Rachel Rivera. She's been a member there longer than I've been one of the employees there. And she wasn't able to make it today because of a family emergency, but I'm going to share her testimony. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, Attorney General Schneiderman and the Mayor's Office for holding this hearing. My name is Rachel Rivera. I'm a board member with New York Communities for Change, and I'm also a Sandy survivor. While we have many experts testifying today that we appreciate, we also want to put some focus on the results of climate change on people like me, ordinary New Yorkers. Before I get into that, I want to say to Attorney General Schneiderman, your willingness to stand up to Trump to enforce our laws, to help people is deeply appreciated. Your fight to hold Exxon accountable is path-breaking. Your support for a corporate polluter fee, which would make polluters pay for the climate pollution they currently dump into our air for free, also sets the pace for progressive governance to fight the climate crisis. I'm a mom with a family. During Sandy, I heard a crackling noise from my ceiling. I got very worried and grabbed my smallest child from her bed. Immediately after that, the roof came down on her bed. We ran out into the night with just about nothing. From there, we went into the shelter system, which you know can be a very real struggle. We lost everything, including our pets. I'm a pretty strong adult, so I can handle the situation. My daughter is just a child. She still has nightmares about Sandy and gets scared when it rains and thunders. I'm also Puerto Rican, so don't I just have the best of luck when it comes to hurricanes? And in all seriousness, it's hard to talk about. My family in Puerto Rico includes my mother and other close relatives. Their houses were all flooded. A close family friend died in the storm. Over 100 days later, as hedge funds and Wall Street rape and pillage the island, Puerto Rico is still without power. The federal government, led by Trump, is handling the situation even worse than Katrina. I'm not the only NYCC member hit by Sandy or hurricanes, of course. These disasters are especially hard because we do not have the money and the power. It's a lot harder to get back on your feet when you're living paycheck to paycheck and face discrimination. Climate change and inequality are deeply intertwined as problems both locally and globally. As bad as they are, these recent hurricanes are only a bitter foretaste of what's to come if we don't rapidly slash climate pollution. We only have a few days left to cut pollution fast enough to have any real hope in holding heating below 2 degrees Celsius, and we need to act fast now at the federal, state, and local level. I'm very glad to see your fight, General Schneiderman, against the repeal of the Clean Power Plan. While the plan does not lead to deep enough pollution cuts alone, it's still vital to put in place because it would force pollution reductions for many states, often red states, that are not acting anywhere fast enough. But that's not to say that New York is doing enough. Far from it. Let me say this clearly to Attorney General Schneiderman. You are leading. The rest of the state, led by Governor Cuomo, needs to step up. We appreciate your work, however. On the city level, energy use in buildings accounts for. I'll be happy to share more of it after this. Again, my name is Patrick Houston with New York Communities for Change. And I can also help you get in touch with Rachel Rivera. So finally, she concludes, sadly, the mayor and Councilmember Constantini's proposals for the buildings plans fall far short of what is realistically needed to meet our climate goals. They do not cut pollution fast enough or deep enough, and we need much stronger requirements for buildings. That's the Climate Works for All plan, which we support. It would create good jobs to solve the climate crisis while protecting affordable housing. I can tell you firsthand what the future of far more extreme weather looks like. We cannot allow this city to be flooded away. Thank you for fighting for the repeal of the Clean Power Plan. Together we can solve this. Again, thank you, Attorney General Schneiderman and the Mayor's Office for holding this important hearing and bringing these important issues to light.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Sorry. Good afternoon. Thank you to the offices of Attorney General Schneiderman, Mayor de Blasio. Thank you to the New School for hosting. I'm speaking today on behalf of the Institute for Policy Integrity at NYU School of Law. We are a nonpartisan think tank dedicated to improving the quality of government decision-making through advocacy and scholarship in administrative law, economics, and public policy. We've conducted extensive analysis of the Clean Power Plan, and you can find a lot of materials on our website. It's policyintegrity.org. So I'm going to really briefly run through some of our main points relevant to the repeal. First and most importantly, the Clean Power Plan delivers enormous net benefits to the public. The agency's analysis of the rule original analysis of the rule showed that it would generate between $32 and $54 billion in annual health and environmental benefits, compared to between 5.1 and 8.4 billion in annual compliance cost to industry. Recent analyses that are actually compiled in a new policy integrity report show that the compliance costs would now, in fact, be far lower due to electricity sector trends. Repealing the rule would only benefit a small group of companies, leaving Americans to pay the price for dirtier air and dangerous impacts from a changing climate. Second, as we argued when the rule was first under attack, the approach taken by EPA in originally promulgating the rule was legal and steeped in bipartisan precedent. The original rule is consistent with decades of Clean Air Act practices under both parties, despite Administrator Pruitt's claims of illegality. Third, the public should be concerned that the current administration's efforts to repeal the Clean Power Plan have not been conducted in good faith. EPA relies on disingenuous and faulty analyses in order to make the repeal appear cost-benefit justified. The analysis accompanying the proposal claims that the repeal will save the electric power producers up to $33 billion annually by 2030. In 2015, just 2 years ago, EPA estimated that the rule's emissions goals could be achieved at less than a fifth of that price. Additionally, the means by which the administration is seeking to dismantle this critical climate policy follows a pattern of questionable deregulatory tactics. Several similar attempts by the administration to roll back rules that benefit the public have gone to courts, only for the administration's actions to be overturned. Fourth, and finally, EPA is currently seeking comments on a replacement rule, but its favored approach for a new regulation would doubtlessly prioritize reducing cost to industry over improving public welfare. We stress that an inside-the-fence line approach to regulating power plants would likely result in increased greenhouse gas emissions and other air pollutants, increasing damages to both climate and the public health. Such a policy would certainly not represent the best system of emissions reduction called for in the statute, and would do an injustice to both the intent of the original rule and to the American people. Thank you.
Thank you. Following this panel, the next panel will be Harriet Shigarma, Christine Clark, and Rabbi Marissa James in the next panel. I'd also like to remind everyone to please try and adhere to the 3-minute timetable to allow for everyone to have the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for having this hearing. My name is Judith Weiss. I'm a professor emerita of marine biology at Rutgers University. I think the first one to talk on behalf of the 70% of the planet that is the ocean that is severely impacted by climate change. I have a number of points to make. Firstly, the ocean absorbs most of the heat that's released, which is good for us, but the ocean is warming faster than the air. And the warmer waters cause, in some cases, disastrous results. You've probably read about the bleaching, the Great Barrier Reef. Coral reefs all over the world are in great danger of surviving because the bleaching involves a sort of departure of little algae that live inside corals that photosynthesize and create most of the food for the coral. When it gets too hot, they are expelled. And when they may recover, but if bleaching events, high temperature events happen too often and too close together, the corals die. And that's what's happened in a huge portion of the Great Barrier Reef. Another effect of the rising temperatures is that animals are moving north. We used to have lobsters in Long Island Sound. Lobsters are pretty much gone from Long Island Sound. They're found further north in northern Maine and Canada. As the temperature warms up, they're moving north, and that's just one example. Thirdly, sea level rise. We had a lot of people talking about effects of sea level rise on human communities. I want to talk about the effect on a natural community that lives at the edge of the water, namely salt marshes. Salt marshes act as a protective buffer for us against waves and wind surge and things like that when there are storms. But the marshes are themselves greatly endangered by sea level rise. They have to either rise up to keep up or move inland. And in an urban area, there's certainly nowhere to go inland. You've got roads and houses right there. So salt marshes are in great danger of being basically exterminated by sea level rise. Another point on a different issue beside warming is the issue of carbon dioxide dissolving in the ocean, which again reduces the amount of warming that we get. But when a lot of the carbon dioxide dissolves in the ocean, about 1/3 of all the carbon dioxide we emit dissolves in the ocean, and that causes the ocean to become more acidic. And the more acidic water is really extremely harmful to animals that make shells. And there are a lot of important marine animals that make shells, many of which are important commercially for us. Mollusks like clams and oysters. And there are already problems of these animals not being able to make their shells properly. So for all these reasons, I'm very worried about the state of the ocean in reference to climate change, and I support the Clean Power Plan as a step in the right direction. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you to the organizers of this hearing, and thank you for this opportunity to offer my remarks to the Environmental Protection Agency, expressing my great concern about the dangerous and ill-advised proposal to repeal the critical protections of the Clean Power Plan. My name is Dr. Adrienne Wald. I'm a college nursing professor and public health advocate, as well as a member of the Alliance of Nurses for a Healthy Environment, and a member of the American Public Health Association. The proposed repeal of the Clean Power Plan will put the health of our citizens and our environment in serious danger. While I'm also deeply concerned about the impact of the proposed repeal on our economy, the harmful effects on human health, and especially on health equity, are of grave concern to me. As a nurse scientist and educator, I teach future nurses, some are here with me today, how to protect human health and prevent disease. As nurses, we treat patients who suffer from the well-known health effects of carbon pollution and climate change, the change that the Clean Power Plan is designed to address. These health effects from smog and air pollution particularly harm the health of those who are most vulnerable, our elderly patients, young children, and those with cardiac or lung diseases such as asthma and patients with chronic conditions. The EPA's own projections, as have already been stated here, when fully implemented, will greatly protect public health by preventing on an annual basis thousands of premature deaths, heart attacks, asthma attacks. In New York, our lower income and other vulnerable communities, including Black, Latino, Asian, and others, will be disproportionately affected by reckless EPA actions, likely increasing existing health disparities, such as the much higher rates of asthma in low income and communities of color. The Clean Power Plan is a critically important step in reducing carbon pollution from power plants, taking real action on climate change nationally. It sets strong but realistic standards for power plants, aims to strengthen cleaner and lower polluting energy technology adoption with customized goals for each state. The Clean Power Plan demonstrates the United States' commitment and leadership in addressing global climate change. The plan, by targeting fossil fuel use, takes serious action to address climate change that, as we have witnessed in New York City, has led to record storms like Hurricane Sandy. Nurses were on the front line in hospitals during and after Sandy and witnessed the devastation caused to our patients and communities and the strain put on the healthcare system. Repealing the Clean Power Plan will be harmful and dangerous. The proposed repeal puts our economy at risk, while clean energy creates jobs, prioritizes human health and the health of the environment. I urge the EPA not to repeal or to weaken the Clean Power Plan. Those of us who clearly remember breathing the thick black soot in the late 1960s and early 70s in New York City prior to the Clean Air Act know that this is not the direction we want to go in. Rather, we must take action to reduce carbon emissions while prioritizing the health of New Yorkers and all Americans over the interests of the fossil fuel industry and move forward with the Clean Power Plan. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Catherine McVeigh Hughes. I served 20 years on Manhattan Community Board 1, more than half of that time as chair or vice chair. After Superstorm Sandy, I was appointed to co-chair of the New York Rising Community Reconstruction Program for Southern Manhattan. I'm a founding member of CB1's Manhattan Tip Resiliency Task Force and a member of the New York Harbor Regional Storm Surge Barrier Working Group. Today I speak as a 30-year downtown resident, proud of what we've built and rebuilt in Lower Manhattan, deeply concerned that this investment made by our city, our state, and our entire country is in grave danger from the threats of climate change, extreme weather events, and rising sea levels, and even more so if the Clean Power Plan were to be repealed. A couple of quick facts. One, 2017 was the costliest year ever for the weather and climate disasters in the United States, totaling $306 billion, of which $265 were for the 3 hurricanes. Two, the National Flood Insurance Program offered by the Federal Emergency Management, known as FEMA, and its reauthorization are uncertain. Congressional passed a third-term, short-term extension until January 19th. We do not know if or how much the federal government will assist in rebuilding our community after the next Superstorm Sandy, which cost $19 billion in repairs, and some downtown infrastructure is still under repair, such as the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. 3, Moody's, a major credit rating agency, recently added climate to credit risks and warn cities to address their climate exposure or face rating downgrades. This will impact New York City because scientific data increasingly points to climate change as a major threat to New York City. 4, climate change will worsen inequality in our society if underserved communities become uninhabitable. Migration, some planned and some in panic, will stress already overburdened in social welfare systems and infrastructure. The best way to mitigate these effects is to limit the greenhouse gases that are currently causing infrastructure. Therefore, it is more important than ever for our country and our city to focus on the Paris Climate Agreement of 1.5. I look forward to working with you further on decreasing the use of dirty heating oil in our school buildings and greening our infrastructure. 2, the city must construct a layered defense of local seawalls and regional storm surge barriers to address future storm surge barriers. And 3, as a large investor and as a hub of the global financial system, the city needs to support the work of the Financial Stability Board's task force on climate-related financial disclosures. I'd like to take 1 minute just to show you a couple illustrations. Here's a picture of where the storm surge barrier could be. This graph here is the official sea level rising of possibly 6 feet by 2100. But most importantly are the 2 maps in the back. If we do not meet our goal of 1.5 degrees, you can see a lot of our city will be underwater, and at 4 it's even worse. So I just wanted to point that. Thank you very much.
Following panel number 10, panel number 11 will be Joel Kupferman, Terry Glassman, and Heather Leibowitz. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, and I echo everyone's thanks, and I'll be delivering an abridged version of my written statement. My name is Harriet Sugarman, and I am the Executive Director of Climate Mama, an organization that reaches families in all 50 states and over 100 countries. I am also the chair of the Climate Reality Project New York City Metro chapter and an adjunct professor of climate change policy. In addition, and perhaps most importantly, I am the mother of 2 teenagers who I have raised here in EPA Region 2, which EPA Region 2 represents citizens of New Jersey, New York, Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and 8 tribal nations. Not one hearing held in our region. Shameful and disheartening. Our motto at Climate Mama, tell the truth, actions speak louder than words, and don't be afraid. Sentiments as parents, we all teach our children. We also teach our children early on that if you make a mess, you need to clean it up. Our Mother Earth has shown us in innumerable ways that the mess that we are creating on our planet because of greenhouse gas emissions is not only making her sick, but also creating situations where life for many species, including our own, is now threatened. The Trump administration estimated the proposed repeal of the Clean Power Plan would provide up to $33 billion, although now we hear much less in terms of compliance costs in 2030. Air pollution in the U.S. causes as many as 50,000 deaths per year already and costs as much as $40 billion a year now in healthcare and lost productivity. I think we can do that math. According to a report released yesterday by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the U.S. has sustained 219 weather and climate disasters since 1980, which overall costs reached or exceeded $1 billion, with total cost each, with $1 billion, with costs exceeding totally over $1.5 trillion. And in 2017, there were 16 events with losses in excess of $1 billion, resulting in 362 deaths. And as we just heard, with costs over $306 billion. Health impacts from climate change have directly hurt my family. My son has developed seasonal asthma. My husband and son have severe poison ivy allergies. My daughter has breathing problems. I have friends with West Nile virus and many with Lyme disease. The World Health Organization has told us that air pollution is a carcinogen and perhaps the greatest threat to human health. My husband is an oncologist. He already is too busy. The Clean Power Plan needs to be updated and strengthened, not dismantled. In hindsight, we now know that including gas, a fossil fuel, as an option within the Clean Power Plan was and remains a serious mistake. Science is clearly showing us that gas is a plank leading to a steep cliff and a bridge to nowhere. Fix the Clean Power Plan. Don't dismantle it or repeal it. Carry out the EPA's stated mission to protect human health and the environment. Enact strong carbon pollution standards. Global warming pollution and its impacts are creating immense social, economic, and moral costs that we are now passing on to our children. Their future and ours depends on what we all do today. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Christine Clark. I'm the Environmental Director with Action Together New Jersey. We are 18,000 progressives across the state at atnj.org. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. As a mother of 4, as my son's homeschool teacher, as a director, and as a team lead with Action Together New Jersey, as one of 2 members of my household with asthma, as someone concerned with the conditions of the country and the planet my children will inherit, I am here to ask that the EPA keep, support, and improve the Clean Power Plan. As per the EPA, this first ever United States plan to reduce fossil fuel emissions and protect clean air was created after unprecedented outreach to states, tribes, utilities, stakeholders, and the public, including more than 4.3 million comments received on the final rule. It is by the nature of its creation a demonstration of democracy at work, finding best practices to uphold. The Clean Power Plan is a critical puzzle piece in solving the big picture problem of how to tackle human-accelerated climate change. It cuts pollutants that harm public health while encouraging the development of cleaner energy like solar and offshore wind. It supports growth of our economy as the global renewables race demands better technology, forward-thinking scientific exploration, and the collaborative decision-making that helps America thrive. Wind and solar are the fastest growing employers for a multitude of reasons, and not least among them is the strong public desire to move toward a clean energy future. These renewable options offer a compelling means for states to meet Clean Power Plan goals, which would reduce greenhouse gas emissions 32% below 2005 levels by 2030. My team and my family are behind this movement as well. My son has expressed an interest in pursuing marine biology and is upset reading about ocean dead zones and the president's offshore drilling ideas, while bills like the Save Our Seas Act of 2017 are stalled in House subcommittees, and the EPA under Scott Pruitt is considering repealing environmental safeguards like the Clean Power Plan. Our EPA is supposed to protect public health, clean air, lands and waters, and as is the case in present time, transition us forward into reliance on renewable energy with bold leadership and action plotted on behalf of the common good. Considering that scientific consensus establishes the Earth is warming due to human activities and greenhouse gases are a threat to public health, the Clean Power Plan's actionable goals to reduce those threats must be upheld and improved. The United States is supposed to be a global innovator and an exemplar in doing the right thing. To forfeit our international leadership on climate action and repeal protective regulations that safeguard the public are not only dangerous to the people and the planet, but show a full abandon of the foundational principles upon which our sense of national identity was established. There is no honor in choosing short-term pollution, profit over public health, especially when failure to enthusiastically compete in the booming renewables market globally or set and keep good policy practices would jeopardize our long-term economic position as a nation. We must keep the Clean Power Plan and improve it. Thank you for the opportunity to submit testimony.
Honored state and city representatives, beloved New Yorkers, I'm Rabbi Marisa Ilana James. I am one of 3 rabbis who serve at Congregation Beit Simchat Torah here in Manhattan. CBST is one of the first and largest synagogues serving LGBTQ people and straight individuals and families. I am here representing our whole congregation and especially the more than 200 children in our congregation who will suffer most from the effects of climate change if Administrator Pruitt and the Trump administration go through with plans to end the EPA's Clean Power Plan. The Supreme Court has ruled 3 times that the EPA is legally obligated to protect. We not only support this plan, but want a more ambitious one that cuts more carbon more quickly from the power sector, one that replaces fossil fuels with clean energy. Our community's building, our synagogue, is already powered by 100% renewable energy, and that's the goal we want to achieve for our state, our city, and our nation. Across the nation, 52 municipalities, 6 counties, and the state of Hawaii have committed to transitioning to 100% clean power, and New York City and New York State can absolutely get on board. At CBST, we've seen what happens when we disregard the impact of fossil fuels on our climate. In Hurricane Sandy, we lost prayer books, ritual objects, part of our archives, and individual members of our community lost much more. We were out of our home in the West Village for more than 3 months, and we know that we were luckier than many whose lives were devastated by the storm. In this city alone, Sandy, impacted by the impacts of climate change, killed 43 of our fellow beloved New Yorkers. By contrast, there are only benefits to switching to clean energy. Our synagogue's new space has efficient lighting, using 20% less electricity per square foot, supplied by clean sources like wind and solar power. Our energy bills are lower, allowing us to spend more money on programs and projects that benefit our community and our city. Importantly, our commitment to clean energy also helps us meet our religious obligations as Jews. One of the Torah's first commandments is to provide careful stewardship of the world around us that God created. Our tradition calls upon us to choose life and to protect life, whether from simple dangers or from more complex ones, like the pollution pouring from power plant smokestacks. Our obligations are not only to our own community members, to New Yorkers, to Americans, but to the people and living things in every corner of this earth, and to the earth itself. In the description of the creation of the world in the book of Genesis, at the end of each day of creation, God looks at the creations of that day and says, Ki tov, look how good this is. It is painful to look at the devastating effects of climate change, knowing how much work there is to do before we can honestly look and say, Ki tov, how good this is. But our impact on the earth and its inhabitants must eventually be for good. This is the holy work we must do. Our congregation wholeheartedly supports both the state's and city's efforts to protect the Clean Power Plan. But even more, we urge you and New York's other
other elected officials to do more, especially in the face of Pruitt's and the Trump administration's efforts to destroy federal environmental protections and climate goals. Now is the time for New York's leaders to dream dreams as big as the constituents' dreams. We will be standing here behind you. New Yorkers are known for making things happen, and I have faith that we will. Thank you.
Yes. Joel Kupferman, Terry Glassman, Heather Leibowitz is the next panel. That's panel number 11. Following this, the 12th panel will be Kevin Cawley, Nancy Van, and Stephen Altobelli in the next panel after this.
Good afternoon. I'm Joel Kupferman from the New York Environmental Law and Justice Project and the Environmental Justice Initiative. We have written for it. I'm going to skip most of that because I feel like I'm back in elementary school where everyone gave the same country report over and over again. So we basically affirm all those facts, and we just want to bring up one or two others and also maybe break from the pack and try to urge the city, the state, to do more than they have been doing. It's easy, we're all sitting here yelling at EPA and criticizing them, but it's easy to pick a scapegoat. Through our work, I have to say that we sued the feds, the state, and the city at different times, and it's time that all of us work on this team and not just place blame on others. We believe that the CPP is the first and only nationwide power plant carbon emissions reduction program that really works. There's a lot of report about mortality there, but I think the most urgent that just came out from the New England Journal of Medicine, air pollution and mortality in the Medicare population, which analyzed over 8 million people, elderly, that there's significant evidence of adverse effects related to exposure to PM 2.5 and ozone at concentrations below current national standards. Every time we're in a court case, the people, the polluters, or whatever, and even the city, the state approving something, saying it's below those national levels. But all these studies have shown that it even affects people there. So that's the word to the state and the city. The most pronounced were among self-identified racial minorities and people with low income. Among black persons, the effect estimate for PM 2.5 was 3 times as high as that for overall population. So we have to start averaging all those figures and effects that are out there. 1 minute to go. Okay. But what could the New York City mayor and the city council of New York State do? Here's my recommendations. Do not let unfettered buildings take place in flood zones. Do not weaken FEMA's mapping, flood zone mapping. Yesterday's Times, they talked about FEMA wanted to map Canarsie and all the shorelines, and New York City is fighting to make it less, to basically close their eyes that flooding is existing. Don't do that anymore. Do not weaken environmental reviews. Do not let city council rubber stamp projects that are out there. There's a lot of objections by all these community groups here. It comes to city council and they basically rubber stamp it. Do not do that anymore. Do not enforce the bad actor policy. No more contracts and leases for landlords and developers that are violating all these laws, that are polluting, that are causing greenhouse gases, and yet the city gives them a little bit of fines and then just gives them contracts and whatever. Do advise the New York State DEC, Health Department, and other agencies to increase accountability. The Attorney General's office has two roles. One is to be proactive, but the other is defending DEC and the Department of Health. In many, many cases, they're not doing the right thing. We also want to mention that we represent the Tenants Association of Alfred E. Smith Houses. One more minute, I got it. All right. Alfred E. Smith Houses, a $63 million rebuild due to Hurricane Sandy. The trees are being ruined and threatened, and this is under federal, state, and city supervision. And in 1996, Over 700 people died in Chicago from the heat wave, and yet the city and the state is approving a lot of building and the threatening of taking away that open spaces and NYCHA housing. So we just recommend that we listen to everyone that was here, whatever, but before we just throw stones at EPA, that the state and the city should do a lot more. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Terry Glassman, representing myself. I'm a mom, I'm a nurse, and I'm a citizen. I also did attend recently Al Gore's climate reality training. I wouldn't call myself a leader quite yet, but I'm getting there. I got to spend some time and learn everything. I read article after article, day after day, about the atrocities perpetuated on the Environmental Protection Agency by this administration and Scott Pruitt. I watch in disbelief the people put forth to fill positions, people with no scientific background, bubbling through Senate hearings, incoherently trying to answer simple questions regarding climate change and science. I have a real concern about the direction the EPA is being taken. I voice my opinions. The frequent refrain is to not get worked up about it. There's nothing you can do about it. I cannot sit back. I cannot relax about it. There's something that I and everyone else can do about it. Gone are the times when you didn't have to get politically involved and fight, because I believe we are at a precipice. We need to speak up and be heard. Isn't that what it's about to be Americans? If that's not, then what is? We elect politicians to speak for us. Are they listening to us? I'm glad that you are listening to us. Do we really want to throw in the towel and let the chips fall where they may? I don't want to argue with one side or the other. I don't want to be right to prove someone else wrong. I want to be logical, pragmatic, and conscientious about the path we take from here. I'm not a politician, but I am passionate about the earth we live on. All this political turmoil does need to be worked out. We need to come together as a country, as a city, as a community, and we need and when we do, we need to have a viable planet to live on. We all need to take care of our home. So I take this road. I'll continue to fight for our environment, so when we get it all figured out, when we come together and head in a good direction, and we do what's best for the many, not the few, we will still have a healthy planet to move forward on. It's not about money or winning, it's about survival. We have one Earth and one environment, and all the fossil fuel money in the world will be of no use to anyone if we pollute the Earth to the point of no return, and we are approaching this precipice. Climate change is not a political issue. The climate, the atmosphere, the health of our planet affects each and every person. The World Health Organization announced that air pollution is now the single biggest environmental health risk, with approximately 7 million deaths linked to indoor and outdoor air pollution. This is more than double previous estimates. Our atmosphere is not endless. When we pump CO2 and other noxious gases into the atmosphere, it stays there. The Earth is a closed system. What happens here stays here. It's time to respect our limited resources and take the step to protect them for all generations to come. The CPP was designed to hasten state utilities' adoptions of renewable energy, improve air quality and public health across the nation, and ensure that the United States meets its commitment to the Paris Climate Accord. I oppose the repeal of the CPP presented by the administrator of the EPA, Scott Pruitt. The Environmental Agency's mission is to protect human and environmental health. The CPP is in accordance with this mission. Regardless of our political ideology, we all share the same earth and the same atmosphere. Let's protect our greatest asset. So I send this out there, my little voice striving to be heard. Those of you who have the political voice, protect us. I submit this with a petition I wrote that had about 600 signatures to the EPA. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Heather Leibowitz. I'm the Director of Environment New York, and I just wanted to say thank you to the Attorney General's Office, Mayor de Blasio, the DEC, and everyone else involved. And I'm happy to have the opportunity to provide testimony today. I'm here to speak out in opposition to any attempt to repeal and weaken the Clean Power Plan. As if it wasn't already clear, 2017 provided much more evidence that we are changing our planet in dangerous ways. The average temperature across the U.S. was 2.6 degrees warmer than normal, making it one of the 3 warmest years in U.S. history. Fires raged across the western states with more than 1 million acres burning in Montana, while in California, wildfires burned into the usually calm month of December. These signs are a planet-wide fire alarm, warning us that we are burning way too much coal, oil, and gas. We know that major reductions in global warming pollution are urgently necessary, and that we must stop putting carbon into our air and repower our society with clean, renewable energy. However, the Trump administration is pouring more fuel on the fire of climate change instead of trying to put them out. The administration is working to dismantle the Clean Power Plan, the first and only federal limit on global warming pollution from power plants that protects public health, promotes climate change solutions, and encourages investment in clean energy. If fully implemented, the Clean Power Plan would reduce U.S. power plant emissions 32% by 2030 with huge corresponding health and environmental benefits. By 2030, it would prevent as many as 4,500 premature deaths each year, along with 90,000 asthma attacks and 300,000 missed work and school days. Repealing the Clean Power Plan would mean more sick kids, more expensive hospital visits, and thousands of premature deaths that would have been prevented and could lead to more intense and destructive severe weather events. The Clean Power Plan would also accelerate the transition to clean energy that is already underway. Here in New York, our state has really been the leader to cut power plant pollution as part of an innovative and successful regional greenhouse gas initiative, along with 8 other states in the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast. But this program by itself is not enough to stop catastrophic climate change. We've seen states, cities, and businesses across the country moving forward with clean energy solutions that reduce air and carbon pollution and grow the clean energy economy. In contrast, EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt and others in the Trump administration are attempting to take us backward by repealing the Clean Power Plan with limited public engagement and transparency. This is truly ridiculous. The Clean Power Plan didn't come out of thin air. EPA conducted extensive public outreach and solicited stakeholder feedback from every corner of the country. It is based on the strong legal foundation consistent with the law, earlier court precedent, and other EPA standards that protect America from dangerous pollution. Americans have sent more than 8 million comments to EPA in support of standards limiting carbon pollution from new and existing power plants that more than ever have been received by the agency. And in conclusion, dismantling the Clean Power Plant poses grave risks to citizens and communities across New York and the United States. Climate deniers and fossil fuel lobbyists have freedom of speech in this country. However, they do not have the right to yell fire in a movie theater, and they do not have the right to endanger our children's lives. Ignoring air pollution won't make our country great for kids with asthma or older Americans who are struggling to breathe. Ignoring climate change won't make American families safe from storms powered by oceans that are rising and growing warmer, or wildfires fueled by hotter temperatures. When it comes to global warming, President Trump needs to accept the science, recognize the reality, and put the health and well-being of Americans first. Thank you.
This is the 12th panel. The panel after this will be the 13th, and that will be Christopher Vicchiola, Pramila Malik, and Johanna Fallert.
Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Altabelli. I'm on the staff of the American Thoracic Society. I would first like to thank you all for convening this hearing this afternoon. The ATS is a medical professional society of more than 16,000 physicians, scientists, and allied health professionals dedicated to the prevention, detection, treatment, cure, and research of respiratory disease, critical illness, and sleep disordered breathing. Think of our members as the lung doctors. Our members are deeply concerned about the reality of climate change and the real and negative impact global climate change will have on our patients, our community, and the world at large. First off, let's start with what should be obvious. Climate change is real, and it's driven primarily by human activity. The science documenting the reality of climate change is clear, consistent, comprehensive, and compelling. The many reports of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and the U.S. National Climate Assessment collate and summarize the wealth of scientific literature that documents the reality of climate change. In short, human activity, particularly our energy use, is literally changing the global environment for everyone. These changes, if left unaddressed, will have adverse global consequences for generations to come. Climate change harms human health in multiple ways. First, heat waves are predicted to worsen. Extreme heat increases mortality, especially in the elderly and those with chronic disease, and increases hospitalization for respiratory and other causes. Second, climate change worsens air pollution. High temperatures result in higher levels of ozone pollution, which worsens asthma and increases risk of respiratory hospitalization and mortality. Third, climate change lengthens the pollen season and raises pollen production, which may help explain the increasing prevalence of allergy in the U.S. Fourth, mold exposure is increasing due to more frequent hurricanes, heavy rainfall, and flooding. This can trigger asthma attacks and worsen other chronic lung conditions. Fifth, wildfires release a range of pollutants, including particulate matter and acrolein, which is a respiratory irritant, and carcinogens such as formaldehyde and benzene. Breathing wildfire smoke increases the risk of respiratory and cardiovascular emergency room visits and hospitalizations. As you can see, associated health effects are happening now, and our members are seeing it. In a 2015 survey, 77% of U.S. ATS members noted worsening of chronic lung disease as a consequence of climate change. These are our health effects our docs are seeing every day, and they're getting worse. In response, the U.S. has been advocating for years for vigorous policy action on climate change. We have conducted a number of hearings in Congress. We've testified before the Congress and the EPA. We've filed amicus briefs in federal court. We're disappointed in the Trump administration's decision to repeal the Clean Power Plan, and we strongly urge the administration to reconsider its decision. And thank you for your time here. I have a longer statement that we've submitted. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nancy Vann. First, I'd like to thank Attorney General Schneiderman for convening this panel so that we all can be heard. I'm a retired Wall Street lawyer and the president of Safe Energy Rights Group. When that organization was formed, its main focus was fighting against the installation of a 42-inch high-pressure frac gas pipeline a little over 100 feet from the critical structures at the Indian Point nuclear power plant. That plant is less than 40 miles up the Hudson River from where we're sitting right now. We considered a lot of names for our group. Stop the pipeline, don't frack with our nukes. But what really wanted was safe energy, so we went with that. No health risks, no explosions, no killing our planet. I think if we ask everyone in this room, well, maybe not quite everyone, if Scott Pruitt's still here, what do you really want from our energy future? Safe energy would be the answer most would give, the number one answer. So what we're here to discuss is not our goal, but which energy path is the least risky and what's the best way to get it implemented. The Trump path to climate change denial is by far the worst, a 9.5 on a 10-point scale of most horrible. I give it a full 10, except that every time we think things can't get any worse, they do. But we other human beings can consider a number of choices for where to put our hopes and our money, and those seem to be one and the same thing these days. There are truly clean energy, wind, solar, existing hydro, wave, geothermal, and the often overlooked efficiency. Some of those may seem expensive now, but will yield economies later that will more than make up for the costs. Then there's nuclear. As a matter of full disclosure, I live about 5 miles from the Indian Point plant, so I'm considered a Frontline resident. Not a lot of consolation for the very serious cancer I developed 7 years after moving there. But a pipeline rupture there would likely have a blast radius of about 4,000 feet, completely engulfing the plant. And the immediate radioactive emissions would be predicted to cover a 50-mile radius. Remember how far I said we were from Indian Point? 40 miles. Feel any safer now? Of course, there's an array of fossil fuels. The differences between coal, oil, and gas can be debated, but even skeptics concede that methane, or natural gas, remains the most in the atmosphere at least 12 years, and during that time, it's more than 80 times worse than CO2 as a greenhouse gas. The fact is, methane is worse than either coal or oil in the relevant future of 12 years. And 12 years will arrive at 2030, the target date for the implementation of the Clean Power Plan. A plan which seeks to curtail CO2 emissions but does nothing to address the far more dangerous methane emissions until building block 3. In the meantime, billions of dollars are being spent on infrastructure to enable us to produce even more methane in 2019, 2020, 2021, and so on. 2029 methane will hang around until 2041. Those molecules will be mocking us for decades if efforts are not made to stop them now. We need to not repeal the Clean Power Plan. We need to replace it with a safe power plan that actually includes all of the threats to our environment. And we shouldn't even have to debate whether it will be repealed. We should be fighting tooth and nail to make it better. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm having trouble guessing the head count in the room now, but I want to say thank you to everybody who stayed with us for the day and the afternoon, and also the panel. My name is Kevin Cawley. I'm an executive director of the Thomas Berry Forum for Ecological Dialogue at Iona College. I'm also speaking on behalf of the New York Metro Catholic Climate Movement. I wonder how many in the room were at the march in April, way back, for care of the earth and climate. There was a sad moment, for me at least. We're walking back from the march, it's over, everybody's hot and exhausted, and we're passing the EPA building. And you could see what had happened. People who had been marching with their signs and their banners were leaving them on the steps of the EPA. It looked like one of those very sad shrines you see sometimes at the scene of a tragic accident, when they leave flowers and candles. And it reminded me today, as we're talking about the EPA, there are still people there at the EPA laboring away as best they can. And if we could keep them in mind, there are lots of good folks still trying to do the right thing. As a Catholic, I lift up Pope Francis' statement in his 2015 encyclical, Laudato Si. There's an urgent need to develop policies so that in the next few years, the emission of carbon dioxide and other highly polluting gases can be drastically reduced. For example, substituting for fossil fuels and developing sources of renewable energy. Care for our poor and vulnerable neighbors and care for creation are integral themes of Catholic social teaching. Climate change poses an undeniable threat to our security, our public health, and economy. Now is the time to support critical climate change safeguards, build a clean energy economy that works for everyone, and protect human life and dignity and all of God's creation. I support continuation of the CPP. Should EPA decide to repeal and replace it, then the replacement rule must meet or exceed the CPP's human health protections and carbon reduction goals. Furthermore, the CPP should not be repealed until the replacement rule is operational. EPA's mission is to protect human health and the environment. CPP repeal without an equal or superior alternative in place would leave a vacuum that harms human health and the environment. As EPA has signaled its intention to repeal the CPP, I urge EPA not to do so. Thank you for your time.
Up next is panel 13. Following this, the 14th panel will be Karen Barbanel, Basabi Bofa, and Julie Clever.
My name is Christopher Vicciol. I served as an advisor for the Obama administration. I'm with New York Renews. I am against Mr. Pruitt and other members of the Trump administration to repeal the Clean Power Plan that's in place. It's a known fact, it's obvious that toxins destroy your lungs and other parts of your organs. That's just common sense. Obviously, Mr. Trump and Mr. Tillerson are very involved with oil. We've seen oil spills happen, destroying wildlife and even destroying human beings' lives. I'm also a member of Black Lives Matters, and I've seen people of color being affected by abusive powers as far as with energy. It divides people. I am very supportive of the Clean Energy Power Plan. I served also with the Christic Institute law firm with the Karen Silkwood case years ago against the Karen McGee nuclear power plant. Obviously, I'm going to be very short and direct with this. Common sense. Toxins destroy human beings. Toxins destroy wildlife. The upper 1%, Mr. Trump and his administration will also be affected as the environment deteriorates. It affects everybody. So, in essence, I do support the Clean Power Plan. I wanted to thank Attorney Schneider's office and Mayor de Blasio's office for bringing this together here. Thank you very much.
So I'm going to ask people who are leaving to please stay for the next couple of minutes. Myself and the next speaker represent Frontline communities, and I think we deserve to be heard because it's time for some truth telling. And please turn your clocks off. Thank you. My name is Pramila Malik. I'm the chair of Protect Orange County, an all-volunteer grassroots community organization. I would like to thank Attorney General Schneiderman and Councilman Constantinidis for the opportunity to present testimony on this critical matter. Protect Orange County represents several frontline communities in New York under siege by ever-expanding frack gas infrastructure due entirely to the extreme extraction economy of fracking embodied in the Clean Power Plan. This hearing has been framed by a false and dangerously politicized narrative which ignores facts and science. That narrative is that the Clean Power Plan is a bold, progressive initiative to combat climate change and incentivize investment in renewable energy that is now thwarted by Donald Trump and climate-denying ideologues who only seek to protect the archaic fossil fuel industry. This is entirely false. The Clean Power Plan will facilitate greater dependence on frack gas. By only regulating CO2 and not methane, it gives new frack gas power plants supremacy over existing coal plants, actually displacing investments in renewable energy. Grassroots environmental groups disagree with our colleagues in the NGO world on this plan. While they have large institutional donors to answer to, we answer only to impacted citizens and the air, water, and climate stability that we depend on. We oppose the Clean Power Plan based entirely on the science and the impacts that we bear witness to on a daily basis. We are not climate deniers nor Trump supporters, but are bold climate activists. We are fractivists. The Clean Power Plan will rapidly precipitate an irreversible climate change as well as public health catastrophe that will adversely impact New York citizens, both directly and indirectly, due to our close proximity to the frack fields in Pennsylvania, our role as a critical transportation corridor for frack gas, as well as our large annual consumption of energy. New York City is the second largest consumer of power in the world. Wrap your head around that. And if the Clean Power Plan is adopted, it will become entirely dependent on frack gas. Methane has 86 to 100 times the global warming impact as CO2. And although coal burns cleaner than natural gas,
gas leaks methane from wellhead to consumption at a measured rate of 15%. Climate science tells us frack gas is substantially worse than coal, and of course nuclear has no comparative carbon footprint. These estimates are conservative. Living near these facilities, we know they leak methane constantly because we can smell it. We consulted with several prominent climate scientists, Howarth, Ingraffia, Hansen, and Jacobson, and none thought the Clean Power Plan was a good idea. Orange County, known for the famed black dirt region of New York, yields an abundance of organic crops due to its rare soil. Just an hour outside of New York City, it is one of the largest suppliers to city farmers markets. It is also home to many first responders who risk their lives every day to serve and protect you, New York City. Yet our communities have been designated a sacrifice zone as a large 650 megawatt frack gas power plant, the CPV Valley Power Plant, is constructed in the middle of a critical environmental area to serve New York City, approved as a result of bribery, and we're still waiting for your office to investigate it. And if New York City becomes dependent on this plant, it's game over for the climate. Scientist Anthony Ingraffia says it will increase the state's greenhouse gas emissions from the power sector by in excess of 10%. Just like that, overnight, if the switch is turned on. And also, he calculated that it would cost us $900 million a year in healthcare and infrastructure costs. In Dutchess County, Cricket Valley is being developed also to serve New York City. Together, they will increase greenhouse gas emissions by over 25%. Attorney General Schneiderman, if you really want to prevent catastrophic climate change, you must prosecute these projects. Today, as I speak, children in our community are being poisoned, pets and farm animals are dying. Families are being displaced from their homes, farms and forests are being fragmented, and our planet is being cooked faster than science can document. This plan would exponentially expand those impacts, and we will be catapulted out of the proverbial frying pan into the fire. And yes, there are many environmental justice communities in its path, like the one next to the CPV Valley Power Plant, who were so excluded from the process that they thought a hotel was under construction. And more alarming is that what's happening in the frack fields of Pennsylvania foretells our future as infant mortality rates and childhood cancer rates skyrocket, while regulators ignore the high radioactivity of frack gas. As I drove down the FDR the other day, with Indian Point already half closed, I saw gas power plants, Astoria, East River, Ravenswood, pouring toxic radioactive emissions into the sky. I thought of all the children living near those plants, like under Astoria Gen in Councilman Constantinides' district, and the silent assault on their bodies. If you support the Clean Power Plan, that's what you are sentencing all of our children to. It is a dangerous deception. You can't trade poisons and trade victims and call it an environmental victory. Our children deserve better. And those of you who understand that this plan facilitates fracked gas, it is naive to think that it could be fixed or improved under this administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Pramila. I'm Johanna Fallert from Poughkeepsie, New York. I'm a member of the Dutchess County Progressive Action Alliance, and I live in a Frontline community. I believe the battle to protect the Clean Power Plan is the wrong battle. It's akin to U.S. Attorney General Sessions waging a war against marijuana when we have the largest opioid addiction problem ever. The CPP was created when we thought that natural gas was clean energy and a good substitute for coal plants that emit the greenhouse gas carbon dioxide. Now we know better. We know that the main component of natural gas is methane, the most powerful of greenhouse gases that contribute to global warming. Methane is 86 times more powerful over a 20-year period than carbon dioxide emitted from coal plants or any other place. The Clean Power Plan is the wrong plan for our times because it incentivizes the natural gas industry. Natural gas energy accelerates global warming, endangers the planet, and harms our health. Mr. Schneiderman, you and Governor Cuomo need to put more money, more time, and more effort into ending the fossil fuel industry in New York, now, not later. We desperately need you to lead us to clean energy, renewables, and energy efficiency in New York State. Under Governor Cuomo, New York is rapidly expanding its gas infrastructure. Methane leaks into the atmosphere when it's fracked out of the earth, when it's transported through the pipelines, and when it's burned at the power plant. The optics are great when the Attorney General and Governor are suing the Environmental Protection Agency because air pollution from other states is damaging air quality in New York. The reality, however, is that New York is allowing 2 more power plants fueled by natural gas to be added to the infrastructure. Hundreds of people spoke out against the Competitive Power Ventures plant in Middletown at a hearing like this, but the governor's representatives expressed his approval. My own congressman in the 18th Congressional District, Sean Maloney, is distancing himself from CPV. In Dutchess County, New York's DEC approved the Cricket Valley gas-fired plant. It will be among the largest plants fueled by gas in the Northeast. Congressman Faso, who worked the current greenhouse gas complying with the Paris Agreement. In conclusion, New York's planet-cooking, polluting gas infrastructure is perfectly aligned with the Clean Power Plan, and we must redirect the state's focus. Everyone who breathes loses when there is air pollution. In New York, in 2016 and 2017, there were nearly 12.5 million people living within a half mile of gas and oil infrastructure, and almost 3 million of them were students from daycare through college age. 750,000 kids who are especially vulnerable to pollution suffered asthma from pollution due to oil and gas ozone smog. 500,000 school days were lost due to sickness from oil and gas ozone smog pollution. Overall, 238 New York counties have elevated cancer risk concerns. This data is well documented by reliable sources that I am happy to provide. The governor and Mr. Schneiderman want to protect us from out-of-state pollution, but who will protect the people of New York from the state of New York? I traveled 2.5 hours to New York City to urge Messrs. Schneiderman and Cuomo to fight harder to protect all of us here, as well as the future of our children, by taking action to end fossil fuel dependency now. Thank you.
Panel 14, I believe, is Karen Barbanel, Basabi Bufa, and Julie Kleber. Might just be you. No, we're gonna go to the next panel if there's no one else from the panel I read. So I'll add to this panel Susie Winkler and Ruth Hardinger. Sure. No one else. I called first. How about Margaret Perkins?
Hello, thank you for having us here today. My name is Julie Kleber, and I'm a registered oncology nurse. I'm here today representing myself, the Alliance of Nurses for Healthy Environments, and most importantly, my patients. Repealing or weakening the critical protection of carbon emissions fails to protect all Americans from the harmful health implications of air pollution and climate change. The U.S. Global Change Research Program highlights in their 2016 report, The Impacts of Climate Change on Human Health in the United States, a scientific assessment, that the negative health effects we will develop as a result of our lack of protecting carbon emissions includes and is not limited to asthma, lung disease, poor mental health, premature death, cardiac disease, gastrointestinal disease, and vector-borne diseases such as Lyme disease. For my oncology patients, many of whom have already weakened immune systems, these health implications are even more dire. It is challenging to tell a patient they can't go out in public, especially in New York City with a close proximity to others, for fear of catching a cold or another illness. I can't imagine a world where I have to tell a patient they cannot go outside because the poor air quality will kill them. We are witnessing and will continue to see increases in average temperatures, more extreme weather events, and sea level rise, all highlighted today. After the recently destructive hurricanes and wildfires that occurred across our nation, the real economic and human toll of extreme weather events is evident. Extreme weather damages in 2016 alone is estimated at $53 billion. During Hurricane Sandy, the generators that powered hospitals were flooded to the point the electric grid was shut down, and nurses and staff had to carry patients down many flights of stairs, manually supplying them with oxygen and life-saving measures. America is a pioneer in the field of medical research. All the advances of modern science will be negated if we decide to outline our skyscrapers with smog. The leading world climate scientists are in agreement. We will see more severe and destructive events like this if we do not take measures to transition to clean energy and cut carbon pollution. I support the fundamental solutions that are comprised within the 2015 finalized Clean Power Plan and implore our elected officials and the EPA to set the bar high, lead, and move forwards, not backwards, in our efforts to limit carbon emissions that contribute to these devastating global climate impacts. Thank you.
This talk is a short version of what I have submitted. Ruth Hardinger, that's me, speaking for Damascus Citizens for Sustainability, or DCS. New York State Clean Power Plan must include natural gas as a pollutant and not supposed to be a clean fuel. Besides that, the gas is primarily fracked gas, causing profound damages where it is mined and processed. It's a leak from some of those sources and from compressor pipelines, etc. It's a major source of climate change, not an energy source to be encouraged in a clean power plan. Damascus Citizens had Gas Safety, Inc. actually measure gas distribution pipelines leakage in Manhattan City and found out that at least 6% of the volume of gas moving through the system, and it's likely much higher. There are studies on the DCS website with measurements from 2012 to 2017. Methane is 90+% of natural gas, and methane is 105 times stronger than carbon dioxide in holding heat in the atmosphere during its 8 and 12 years short-term half-life. In Manhattan, we are standing in a cloud of methane from leaky infrastructure. The gas causes health impacts, including asthma, climate change, including sea level rise. As the climate warms, the water around us is swelling and rising, and we must pay attention. Damascus Citizens for Sustainability argues that natural gas is not a bridge fuel to less hazardous energy sources, but a grave danger to necessary resources and a cause of global climate change. The process that supplies the gas have profound health and environmental impacts. Gas inevitably leaks on the way from the wells to pipelines to end users. It also migrates through the underground pathways to reach aquifers and the surface. The previous mayor, Michael Bloomberg, promoted fracked gas in his current in his current book writes that when safety and responsibility extracted, it has been a good send for the environment and public health. Because of exemptions to major protection laws held on the fossil fuel industry, safe and responsible extraction can't and won't happen. The leaks in the system mining, moving and delivering the gas has been measured, and leaks are far exceeded the level that make the gas even worse than coal. Including gas in clean power plan in any form is going the very wrong way. Thank you very much for the work that you're doing. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I can give you those photographs if you would like to have them.
My name is Margaret Perkins, and I'm a member of the Climate Group 350 NYC. And my testimony is just to make one point about the repeal of the Clean Power Plan. And this point is that this repeal is driven by the 26 states that sued the EPA in 2015. The head lawyer in that suit, of course, was Pruitt, and this alone should have disqualified him from being nominated to the head of the EPA. The investment of this group of states in the repeal is shown in this chart, and you probably can't see it here, but this chart represents the percent of electric power that comes from coal for the states that sued the Clean Power Plan and those that are going to abide by the Clean Power Plan. The percent of power, this is power on the grid, that comes from coal in these 26 states is still 60%. This is compared to only 23% in the states that have are not going to sue against the CPP. And these states also have much more ambitious renewable portfolio standards and a much greater transition to renewable energy. Not surprisingly, these 26 states are a huge drag on our national emissions targets. Although some states have reduced their emissions, and this was detailed, for the RGGI states, this is nowhere near enough what we are seeing in these 26 states. Very few of them, not all of them, there are a few that have decided to invest in renewables, but the majority have not reduced their emission rates, maybe 1% in the last 4 or 5 years. So there's no way that we're going to reach the, there's no way we're going to reach the 26% reduction in emissions agreed upon in the Paris Climate Accords unless these 26 states come under the regulation of a robust clean power plan. And the repeal will further cripple that transition. The CPP has been stuck in the courts for 18 months in the DC District Court due to the suit that was filed by the 26 states and funded by Koch brothers and many other powerful energy corporations, Murray and so on. We know them all. And the question that we all have to answer here is, what are we going to do about this repeal? It looks like the repeal, by all chances, will probably go through. And where are we going to stand? What are we going to do for the next 3 years in terms of these 26 states? Are we going to allow them to pursue their relentless move towards just further and further polluting the atmosphere and causing global warming? Thank you.
Thank you. The time is now 5.